Are there any statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Berowra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The West Pennant Hills Cherrybrook Football Club and the West Pennant Hills Cherrybrook Cricket Club are based at Campbell Park. The football club, the Lions, was established in 1969 and the cricket club dates back to the 1930s. Since then, both clubs have gone from strength to strength with tens of thousands of players calling West Pennant Hills Cherrybrook home. One of the Lions' greatest milestones came in 1995 with the introduction of women's soccer teams, and in 1 year alone they won 3 premierships, 4 championships and 2 pennants. The cricket club, which is one of the largest in Australia, was home to Lisa Sthalekar, a former Australian women's captain, and also to Denise Annetts, who holds the highest test average, 81.9, of any living person. The club won Cricket Australia's Women and Girls Initiative of the Year in 2022. Despite these successes, their facilities are not up to scratch. But great clubs deserve great facilities. After speaking with Keith Everard and Mike Pompey from the Lions and Ross Anderson from the Cricket Club, I had a look around Campbell Park recently and I saw the need for urgent upgrades. Their hard-working club volunteers know that with more women getting involved in soccer and cricket, it's essential that there are facilities to support them. Since I've first been elected, I've taken up the fight and delivered for many local clubs, including funding for new clubhouses, returfing, equipment, storage facilities and bathrooms. I've listened to the clubs at West Pennant Hills and Cherrybrook, and I've started working on a plan on how to support them as they grow and continue their tradition of making our community proud.
I call the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In great news for my electorate, the Labor government has delivered a new Medicare urgent care clinic. Bendigo will now have access to bulk billed high-quality healthcare 7 days a week. In its first month alone, this clinic had over 800 visits, demonstrating the critical need for this service in my electorate. The largest proportion of presentations to the Medicare Urgent Care Clinic were for children. Over 1 in 3 visits were under the age of 18. And as a mum of a 3 and a 4-year-old, I know from talking to kinder parents how this service has made a difference. Almost half of these visits have occurred after hours. Bendigo has struggled to attract GPs to do after-hours services, so this clinic is making a difference. Importantly, this clinic is taking the pressure off the Bendigo Health Emergency Department, which is just around the corner. This clinic has already demonstrated in data provided by Bendigo Health that 1 in 3 visits to the emergency are non-life-threatening conditions. Therefore, having this clinic does give people an alternative. There is very limited access, as I have said, to after-hours bulk billing, meaning after-hours GP services, meaning that people end up at EDs. Labor is helping more people see a GP and helping people get the bulk billing services that they require. All you need for this clinic is your Medicare card.
Call the member for Rye.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Queenslanders woke to an LNP state government last Sunday, a divisive, out-of-touch, untrustworthy government who are already moving to scrap renewables projects, scrap the path to treaty and send more kids to jail. We have a federal election coming up and it's clear we can't take anything for granted. Peter Dutton's LNP are up in the polls and this should be a concern for all of us. Peter Dutton doesn't represent everyday Australians and he doesn't represent the people of Ryan, their values and their hopes. Dutton's agenda is extreme. It's negative, it's divisive and it's out of date. Dutton wants to derail our shift to renewable energy in favour of an expensive, dangerous nuclear fantasy. When Dutton was Health Minister, he tried to abolish bulk billing. He cut and froze the Medicare rebate, leading to its eventual collapse. Dutton opposed same-sex marriage, has voted to weaken a woman's right to choose, is responsible for refugees being deported back to danger. During a cost of living crisis, Labor's inaction has given more oxygen to Dutton and it's time to fight back. The only way to stop Dutton's divisive and out-of-date agenda is with a positive plan for reforms and a hopeful message about our future, and that's what the Greens will fight for. Thank you.
Call member for Bean.
Deputy Speaker, on Sunday I visited BAPS Swaminarayan Mandir in Taylor to celebrate Diwali and the New Year. It was a privilege to be there for the first celebration of Diwali at what is already a very special place in the community. Deputy Speaker, festivals like Diwali are a reminder of the spirit of the Hindu community. Diwali encourages an annual reflection to give and forgive, unite and unify, to prosper and progress. These are all qualities that shine through consistently in the local BAPS community, in the way they work with so many charitable endeavours and the way the community reaches out to the broader Canberra community and welcomes them in. Festivals like Diwali will also remind us of the importance of celebrating our multicultural identity and how our diversity enriches Australian life. By working together, we can create a more safe and harmonious society for all. In this light, we stand with the Hindu communities that practice their faith in Florey and Mawson that experienced vandalism to their places of worship the weekend before. Targeting any place of worship is unacceptable. We need to stand united against such acts of hatred and intolerance. And when we do so, Deputy Speaker, together we can ensure light overcomes darkness.
Call a member for McKellar.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I seek leave to table this document, being a petition in relation to the protection of native bushland.
Has the petition been approved by the Petitions Committee?
No, it hasn't.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
Thank you, Speaker. This petition has been signed by over 25,000 Australians desperate to end the destructive and uneconomic practices of native forest logging and deforestation. The petition is part of a campaign I've been running to save the Aussie bush. The Australian government is permitting native plants and animals to be pushed to the brink of extinction, and what's worse, tens of millions in taxpayer dollars is being used to do it. Not only are we paying forestry corporations to log our native Aussie bush, but it is being used to produce low-value products like wood chips and tomato steaks, and all for a financial loss. Native bushland deserves protection. The Albanese government has the power to do it this year. This petition shows the community wants it done. Thank you.
Call a member for Barton.
It is with great sadness I rise to acknowledge the passing of Auntie Joyce Clegg and Auntie Jennifer Newman, two remarkable First Nations women. Auntie Joyce grew up on Allagundi Mission on the Clarence River. Her work dated back to before the 1967 referendum, right through to the referendum last year. In 1996, Auntie Della Walker and Auntie Joyce began the landmark Yagle native title claim. This led to recognition of over 90 kilometres of the coast and sea, the first of its kind in New South Wales. She did this alongside her husband Colin, a strong ally to Indigenous people, and with their 4 daughters. Both were committed to the Labor cause, Joyce running for pre-selection in the 1980s. Auntie Joyce was a living example of resilience of First Nations culture and people. Auntie Jennifer Newman was a proud Wiradjuri woman who lived in the inner west. A talented storyteller, she used this skill to build understanding and recognition across Australia. Auntie Jennifer felt a deep connection to country and caring for country, and it's hard for me to see that clock. Part of her legacy will be as president of the Cooks River Valley Association.
Call a member for Capricornia.
For 773 days, the communities of Youngla and the Pioneer Valley lived in the shadow of an impending environmental catastrophe. The previous state Labor government's Pioneer Burdekin pumped hydro scheme was more than a misguided project. It was an assault on one of Australia's most ecologically diverse rainforests, a plan that threatened to scar the very heart of our region's natural beauty. This wasn't just an environmental disaster in the making, it was a fiscal sham. The former Premier's agenda would have drained Queensland taxpayers of a staggering $36 billion in the name of ideological policy. But our communities didn't stand by and watch. We fought with every fibre of our being. It was my honour to join the dedicated residents who refused to accept the twisted narratives fed to us by a government willing to trade our precious ecosystems for political gain. Together, we fought their reckless disregard for our environment and our children's future. With over 12,000 voices united, our petition to save Youngla echoed across the state. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that our hard work has paid off. Under the leadership of the LNP Crisafulli government, the nightmare of the Pioneer Burdekin pumped hydro is now just that, a bad dream that will never see the light of day. We stood together, we persevered, and we saved Youngla.
Call a member for Canberra.
Deputy Speaker.
This is a speech as part of the Raise Our Voice campaign from a young person in my electorate. She says, "Hello, my name is Zara and I am 11 years old. My federal electorate is Canberra. Did you know that more than 76,000 kids in Australia showed up to homeless shelters and many were unaccompanied by adults? Most of these kids were fleeing violence or neglect. This should not be the childhood many children grow up in. Many homeless shelters are undersupplied and understaffed, which means they are turning away people who need a safe place to stay. What can Parliament do in the next 10 years to help? First, we should all appreciate staff at homeless shelters for all the help and time they are giving to the community. They are seriously undervalued. Secondly, most homeless shelters don't have enough supplies to handle a lot of homeless people. They need more money and resources. Do you know that what the main cause of homelessness is? Domestic violence. In June 2021, over 700 million people were put to stop domestic violence, but that was just in New South Wales. We need a more substantial Australia-wide plan. This is not a world people should live in. I want Australia in the next 10 years to get some more people off the streets and into a safe place and solve more of the problems that cause homelessness." Thank you, Zara. I'm proud that our government does have a plan, a national plan to address homelessness and a national plan to end violence against women and children in a decade. Thanks again, Zara.
Call member for Fowler.
Deputy Speaker, lots have happened in my electorate of Fowler in the month of October. I was honoured to be part of the centenary celebration of Our Lady of Rosary in Fairfield, a parish that is a pillar of strength and connection for our culturally diverse families under the spiritual guidance of Father Bob, who I know has had a long-term illness and is just coming back to the parish. Bishop Danny Ma's homily spoke to the significant role the church played in the lives of the multicultural congregation. I also joined in St Gertrude's parish in Smithfield to mark its 75th anniversary and the 20th anniversary of the Pauline Fathers as pastoral carers of the parish, joining them in dancing and celebrating a significant milestone at the Club Marconi. But we didn't just celebrate religious milestone, we also celebrated cultural milestone when I joined the Timor Chinese Association's 23rd inaugural presidential dinner at Crystal Palace in Canley Heights, where my office is located, to welcome the new president, Mr. William K. Leong. And I wish him and his committee continuing success with the community work in supporting the rest of those that are the most in need in our community. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Call member for Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A young student from my Blair election participated in the Raise Our Voice initiative. Chloe's words: "Imagine in 10 years' time youth crime is drastically reduced to nothing and young people are engaged in positive activities that contribute to their personal growth and overall well-being of their community. Crime detrimentally impacts individual potential and community safety, leading to long-term social and economic costs. It perpetuates a cycle of violence and inequality, making it harder for communities to prosper. Idle time and lack of supervision are significant factors contributing to youth crime. The Parliament must fund the development of community centres that offer after-school programs, sports, arts and mentoring opportunities. These centres can become safe havens for youth, offering them a sense of belonging and purpose. Our youth are the next leaders. Every single person should have the opportunity to live up to their full potential. Falling into the trap of crime can be unavoidable due to challenging circumstances. We must make a future where youth crime is not only avoidable but entirely non-existent. The future of youth crime is in your hands. We must fund the development of community centres across Australia to prevent crime. Thank you, Chloe, for focusing on the causes of crime when too many people concentrate on crime itself."
Call member for Forrest.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I rise to acknowledge the hard work and kindness for very many years of local Bunbury mechanic Nathan Reid. Nathan, the owner of Advanced Auto Solutions, has since 2016 partnered with the South West Women's Refuge, now known as Harbour, providing used roadworthy vehicles to women and families affected by domestic violence. Nathan takes vehicles that have been kindly donated, works on them at his own cost to ensure they're roadworthy, pays for a period of registration of those vehicles before donating them to women and families in need. A recent recipient of his generosity is a mother of 4 who previously had to spend up to $80 a day on taxis to get her kids to school and other activities. On top of the donation, Nathan has covered the cost of the 2 ongoing services for the vehicle itself. These are life-changing donations. Nathan, because of you, women and their families are able to start rebuilding their lives after dealing with the trauma of domestic violence and regain a sense of independence. Your generosity and hard work is a great example of the impact one act of kindness can have on a person's future. Thank you also to the community members who donate the vehicles that allow these women a fresh start. Anyone who can help, please get in touch with my office and we'll put you in touch with Nathan, and any help you can offer would be greatly appreciated.
Call the member for Macquarie.
Thank you. I recently caught up with dozens of seniors from Leonay, Emu Plains and Emu Heights and the Lower Blue Mountains at my Seniors Forum. Held at Emu Sports, I was delighted to have Assistant Minister for Ageing and Social Security, Kate Thwaites, join me as we discussed everything from aged care reforms to support people to stay longer in their own homes, through to pensions and the challenges of being a self-funded retiree, the seniors' healthcare card, housing challenges and the home equity scheme and other supports available through Services Australia. I want to thank everyone who gave up their time. While I am incredibly proud of the changes that we've made, I know there's more to do as we reform systems so older people are treated with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. Getting residential care right is also a big priority for the Albanese government, with new standards of care and quality already in place and, of course, additional wages for the ever-caring workers. The Assistant Minister and I visited the Uniting Care residential facility, Eden Glassy in Emu Plains, which has a 4-star My Aged Care rating. We spoke with the ladies doing word games, who proved to be quicker at those word puzzles than we were, and chatted over afternoon tea, and I got to see beautiful grandchildren. It was a pleasure to visit.
Call the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The unrealised capital gains issue, call it a Labor threat, still hangs like the sword of Damocles over Australian farmers. And whilst abroad last week, I was interested to read an editorial in the Daily Mail of the 1st of November, which read, and I quote, "Many will have no option but to sell up to pay the bill, destroying businesses held by families for generations and destabilising food security." The comment piece was talking about new taxes being placed on British farmers, but it continued. But why would Labor be bothered? They calculate their voter base as predominantly urban, so it does little political harm. And if it means green fields can be sold off for solar farms or new housing, all the better. Farmers work backbreakingly hard to keep society fed. Their hours are long, and because of their careful stewardship, our countryside remains a precious asset. Any fair-minded government would shower them with rewards, not hit them with a punishing and pernicious new tax. Indeed, I say, but you could replace Labor Britain with Labor Australia, because the facts remain the same. And why is it the left are always punishing our farmers with new taxes? Why is it the left don't realise or care or understand or know where their food and fibre comes from? And it is our farmers who feed our people. It is our farmers who help our exports. It is our farmers who help this country so much and continually get whacked by Labor governments wherever they are.
Call a member for Lyons.
Thank you. I'm thrilled once again to be participating in the Raise Our Voice campaign, which champions the voices of young Australians by giving them a voice in Parliament. This year's topic was, what do you want your community to look like in the next 10 years, and what can the next Parliament do to achieve it? Well, it was difficult to choose just one entry, so here's a small sample of some of them. Amber and Baden from New Norfolk said, quote, "We think there should be a KFC in New Norfolk because it's not fair to have to drive 20 minutes and come back with food that is not finger-licking good anymore," end quote. Jack and Seth, also from New Norfolk, I reckon they were sitting next to each other, said, quote, "Imagine a world where you don't have to drive for that irresistible KFC flavour. A KFC in New Norfolk contributes to shaping our community's development," end quote. Lacey, also in New Norfolk, said, "I would like to see more family bike tracks in the Derwent Valley to get more young people off their devices to see the beautiful world we have. Hip, hip, hooray." And Ashley from Molesworth Primary School said, "I would like to see more national parks, nature walks and bike tracks added to our community to get us outside and off our devices more. Hear, hear, Ashley. Thank you to all the young people in my electorate who took part in this year's campaign. It was amazing to see the amount of engagement and passion and fun that you have for your community, for your local issues and for the Colonel. Long may KFC reign. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I call the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I represent the best community in the country, and for that reason I was so proud to create and present the inaugural Lindsay Awards. This was a night dedicated to recognising and celebrating the incredible contributions made by individuals and organisations within our community. I'd like to thank Nepean Creative and Performing Arts High School for providing the music for the evening. The 6 award categories showcased values of dedication, passion, service and leadership. I want to thank 2 exceptional community leaders, Gay Hawthorne, OAM, the CEO of Penrith CBD Corp, and Joe Tomic, the manager of St Mary's Town Centre, who were instrumental in helping select the winners. Congratulations to the Educator of the Year, Monique Wilson, the Youth Achiever Award recipient, Keisha Celaban. The Community Award was presented to Sue Wellings. Darren Horgan won the Healthy Active Living Award. The Aussie Made business went to Alan and Karen Bentley from Nepean Swim and Fitness. And our Woman in Leadership was Amanda Little. This event was more than an awards night. It was a tribute to our community's spirit and the countless individuals whose hard work and dedication make Lindsay an even better place for everyone. Thank you.
Call member for Gilmore.
Today I'm delighted to read a speech written by 12-year-old Bomaderry High School student Vihan Patel, the winner of the Raise Our Voice competition in Gilmore. Hi, my name is Vihan. I am 12 years old and I am from the electorate of Gilmore. I have been noticing lately that there have been a lot of water flooding problems with the winter season having heaps of rain. I have even faced one of them where my garage flooded with water up to the car's wheels and we spent 5 hours cleaning everything up. So my problem is to upgrade the drainage system. In 10 years, I would like the community to create a rain garden. They are attractive and can be made easily by maintaining everything. They promote the growth of native, flood-tolerant perennial plants. The second one, which I personally think is the best, is planting trees in community gardens or even parks. They come with many benefits like helping reduce flooding. Statistics say that trees minimise surface water runoff by up to 80% more than asphalt. Their extensive root systems help absorb deeper into the ground and help absorb the water flooded to help the tree grow and make community gardens or parks beautiful living places. Parliament can also build more channel drains to move water to an area where it can safely be pushed back into the environment. Those are the ways to reduce flooding and how I want some of these techniques in our community in the next 10 years.
Call member for Flinders.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The extraordinary gift of this job is that you get to take ordinary people and immortalise them in words spoken in this place, so that forever their goodness will be remembered and a source for comfort for those who loved them. So today I rise to speak about my friend Jim Ryan. Jim died on the 28th of August this year, and his life was celebrated by friends and family in a beautiful ceremony on Arthur's Seat on the 13th of October. I met Jim on Main Street in Hastings during the last election campaign. He was selling Anzac Day badges, a thing he did every year. He greeted me like he was my grandfather. "I was waiting for you," he said, knowing full well that my new life as the candidate for Flinders would lead me to his feet one day. Jim was a great volunteer in life. He was there for every single cause, like the Red Hill Show, where he was the Vice President, Second Bite, and indeed for the Liberal Party, where he was the driver of the Bryony bus during Bryony Hutton's contest for Hastings at the state election. He was there every day on pre-poll for me too, handing out how to vote cards, but mostly he was just there filling my heart each and every time I saw him. Jim is one of those characters that so beautifully exemplifies the Mornington Peninsula. Resilient, kind-eyed, generous and loved, quiet and unassuming, and so classy in his glorious simplicity and selflessness. I will miss you forever, my dear friend Jim.
Call the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. I know how important education is to my wonderful community in Chisholm, and it's really important to me too. I've always been an advocate for accessible and affordable pathways to higher and vocational education and the opportunities that they deliver for people, communities and indeed our nation. I'm really pleased that a re-elected Albanese Labor government will cut student debt by 20% for everyone. We'll also reduce the amount graduates have to repay each year, and we'll make free TAFE courses permanent. This is just the start of our positive plan for a second term, helping with the cost of living and building Australia's future. We've been working hard to take pressure off Australians. We know it's been tough for people. Labor has rolled out tax cuts for every taxpayer. We've boosted bulk billing and we've made both childcare and medicine cheaper. Our second term will build on these strong foundations. We'll cut around $5,500 from an average university student's debt, and making the repayment system fairer will ensure that take-home pay will be boosted for people repaying student debts. This is about putting money back into the pockets of young people and putting intergenerational equity back into the system. Together, we can keep building Australia's future. Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker.
Call a member for Durack.
Housing is priority number one for millions of Australians as the Australian dream of home ownership feels more and more out of reach. Under this government, building approvals have fallen to their lowest level in over a decade, dropping 8.8% to just 158,690 new starts in the years 23 to 24. Simultaneously, the government has brought in more than 1 million migrants in their first 2 years in office, whilst only 350,000 homes have been constructed during that time. What a joke. In response, we have announced our plan to keep the dream alive by boosting supply and reducing demand. Our $5 billion housing infrastructure program will help to deliver 500,000 new homes by providing funding to complete those essential enabling infrastructure like water, like power, like sewerage and access roads. There are hundreds of greenfield sites across the country ready for development, but progress has been stalled due to a lack of funding for this enabling infrastructure. A Peter Dutton-led government will also bring down demand by reducing immigration, implementing a 2-year ban on foreign investors purchasing existing homes and capping the number of overseas students. These changes will free up over 100,000 homes over 5 years. The next election will be a clear choice between a Labor government that has crushed the dream of home ownership.
Call a member for Bennelong.
Deputy Speaker, the recent weeks I've been chatting with residents across Lane Cove, Gladesville and Ryde, listening to their experience with our local bus services. I've heard about missed buses, overcrowded routes and far, far too often people left stranded. Parents are understandably anxious about their children getting to school safely, and workers need reliable services to get around on time. Since their bus services were privatised by the last state Liberal government, our bus network has suffered. This 8-year contract has brought on delays, contested timetable changes and ongoing issues with driver shortages. Privatisation, of course, has also made these issues more difficult to address. Privatisation promised improvements, yet the outcomes have shown otherwise. Routes 288, 292, 533 and others have had issues since recent changes, and frequency, overcrowding and reliability have been issues raised directly with me. This is unacceptable and it impacts families every day. Now, obviously, Deputy Speaker, this is very much a state issue, but locals know that when I see an issue in my community that I'm always willing to help. That's why today I'm launching a community survey to hear directly from those locals affected by these changes. I need locals to help me identify the issues so that I can fight for you to get them addressed. Feedback received will go straight to the New South Wales Government as we work together towards better public transport in Bennelong.
Call a member for Wide Bay.
Putting your hand up for election isn't easy, and I acknowledge the candidates who stood in the Queensland state election recently. Voters in Gympie showed their ongoing confidence in Tony Perrott, and I congratulate him on his appointment as Minister for Primary Industries. In Anango, I congratulate Deb Frecklington on her success and appointment as Queensland's Attorney-General. In Nickland, I congratulate my friend and former police officer Marty Hunt, who retook the seat for the LNP. And in Noosa, Claire Stewart ran a campaign that demonstrated her dedication and dignity. While the 15.8% margin Claire was up against was always going to be a mammoth challenge to overcome, she achieved an incredible 7% swing to the LNP. I thank Claire for her efforts and know that she has much to offer the community into the future, and I congratulate Sandy Bolton on her re-election. In Maryborough, John Barunas ran an exceptional grassroots campaign and claimed a seemingly impossible victory in what was a remarkable win. I congratulate John and his campaign manager, John McDonald, for their admirable effort. I also acknowledge the former member for Maryborough, Bruce Saunders, and acknowledge his 9 years of service to the electorate. The LNP campaigns rely on volunteers, and I thank them all for their great effort and in securing a wonderful victory for the LNP in Queensland.
Call member for Holt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Save a Diwali is an inspiring initiative that beautifully embodies the spirit of community and service embraced by Australia's Hindu community. Rooted in the Hindu value of seva, meaning selfless service, Save a Diwali stands as a powerful expression of gratitude towards the communities that have welcomed them. As a migrant myself, I deeply understand the desire to give back. It is why I volunteered for AIMS Australia. This month, 113 Hindu community organisations and 561 volunteers across Australia united in this remarkable effort. Deputy Speaker, together they have collected over 24,000 kilograms of groceries for organisations in need, including 3,000 collected just in my state of Victoria. These groceries have been donated to organisations including Perth Homeless Support Group in WA, Oz Harvest in the ACT, Karma Kitchen in New South Wales, and Food Bank in Victoria, WA, New South Wales, Queensland, and South Australia. To everyone involved in Save a Diwali, thank you for your generosity and commitment. Your dedication to Seva not only strengthens our community, but also reflects the gratitude and responsibility you feel towards the country you now proudly call home.
Call a member for Barker.
Mr Deputy Speaker, communities in the Riverland are bracing themselves for the economic fallout of water buybacks and will inevitably see a decline in primary production and the economic activity in the region that goes with it. While I'll always stand against any policy that reduces the ability of farmers to grow food and fibre in this country, I want to see a thriving and diverse Riverland where we continue the proud tradition of producing high-quality food, but we also welcome visitors warmly to our riverbanks and we protect and preserve the unique ecology of the region. That's why I'm such a strong supporter of Cowpram Station as part of the Riverland's diverse offering. Cowpram creates important employment and training opportunities, environmental education, ecological preservation, and boosts the visitor economy. With the right investment, the possibility for increasing this positive contribution is almost endless. But ageing infrastructure at Cowpram is an impediment to sustainability and growth. It's incredibly frustrating to watch projects like Cowpram Connect be put on hold while building costs blow out and co-contributions withdrawn as a result of State Labor's lack of support for the project. Just as I will take up the fight on water rights to protect and respect the generations of growers, so too will I fight for funding to support the ecotourism and education and training offerings at Cowpram Station. A strong Riverland needs a strong Cowpram, and I'm committed to giving them the infrastructure they need.
Call a member for Taney.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I want to read part of a speech written by Reese, an 11-year-old student at Leeming Primary School in my electorate of Tangney. Reese and many students throughout Tangney wrote some powerful speeches on issues that matter to them, such as education and the environment. Here is some of what Reese had to say. I hope that in 10 years, I will see more greenery and less carbon dioxide emission. I envision a bright future for the environment in the area. Having less car will be great, and having more trees will be amazing too. I would be greatly thankful if less fossil fuel were to be used because of how bad it is for the environment. Burning fossil fuel releases a large amount of carbon dioxide, which causes climate change. We could plant more bushes and trees and stop cutting so many others down. We could try to have less cars on the road and more bikes or paths. I wish to see these changes in 10 years from now. Thanks, Rees, for sharing your vision and for raising your voice. It is important that our Parliament listen to your speech. Thank you.
I call the member for Bradden.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Northwest, the West Coast and King Island is chock-a-block full of unsung heroes. They're everywhere, tirelessly helping those in need. Usually, Deputy Speaker, they work quietly, behind the scenes, without fanfare, except when the Tassie Bash comes to town. What's not to love about buying an old car and giving that car a decent, whimsical dose of wickety whack, driving it around Tassie with your mates and raising money for kids in need? Another great charity, Rapid Relief Tasmania, pulled out all the stops with breakfast, hot coffee, fresh fruit and egg and bacon sangers when the Bashers visited Penguin Pit Stop recently. The Bashers visited Forth Primary School, Boat Harbour, Smithton, Redcar Primary Schools and the Northwest Support School. I've got no doubt, Deputy Speaker, that their visit made those kids' year. They absolutely did. Knowing somebody is out there thinking of them is often enough. So TasBash 24 is a wrap. 1,230 kilometres, 15 themed cars, dozens of passionate bashers and over $283,000 raised for Tasmanian kids. There's no doubt charities like Variety and RRT are making the country better. And I can't thank them enough, and all our great charities enough for all that they do.
Call a member for Lingiari.
Deputy Speaker, it was my great pleasure to join my colleagues, the Assistant Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs, Julian Hill, and the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Melandiri McCarthy, in a multicultural celebration held in Alice Springs on the 17th and 18th of October. The event was hosted by the multicultural community of Central Australia, which has been supporting people coming to Alice Springs from most very culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds since 1985. The event was well attended with great entertainers and community leaders. We thoroughly enjoyed the meeting these proud Territorians who now call Alice Springs home and enjoying the celebrations of their rich cultural diversity. It was great to be part of the Multicultural Community Services of Central Australia's roundtable with many of the multicultural communities participating in exemplary work and leadership in the business community in Alice Springs. The Multicultural Community Services of Central Australia is non-religious, non-partisan, it's community-based, not-for-profit organisation and a registered charity, and does a lot of important work in providing new, emerging and established communities with outreach and support services that help everyone to settle and thrive in our community. It was fantastic to be part of those celebrations over the 2 days with the Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Last month, hundreds gathered at the Rock Christian Church in Capalaba to bid farewell to Wendy Tidbold, a lifelong local whose legacy as a horse rider, saddler, wife, mother, grandmother and friend has left an indelible mark on the Redlands and beyond. She was a global leader in her field and a highly respected member of my community. Wendy rode horses nearly all her life and competed in dressage and show jumping. She was a gifted craftswoman and her products were renowned far and wide. Wendy was a steadfast supporter of side saddle riding in Australia and generously shared her time and knowledge. We were reminded at her funeral that she loved to be challenged and that the word can't simply did not exist within her vocabulary. To her family, Wendy was a source of love, guidance and strength. They remember her not only for her dedication to her craft, but for her faith, her kindness and her joy in life's simple moments. Wendy's warmth extended to her customers and friends whom she treated like family. Those of us who met her and knew her knew that they were in the company of someone truly remarkable. Wendy's loyalty and devotion anchored those she loved, and her faith gave her a profound sense of purpose. Her family carries forward her legacy of resilience, passion, and generosity. Her spirit lives on in each story told, each laugh shared, and in each saddle crafted with love. Our thoughts and prayers go out to her husband, Mike, her children and grandchildren. We will miss Wendy very much.
Call the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Education changes lives. Like many in this place, I was the first in my family to go to university. It changed my life and it changed the lives of my family. Increasingly, tertiary qualifications, TAFE or university, are required to get a job or to continue to get ahead in your career. Employers need skilled workers, industries need skilled workers, and certainly industries of the future will need skilled workers. This government is committed to ensuring top quality, affordable education is available for all Australians, and we're acting on it. Pay rises for early childhood education workers is part of building up a skilled workforce in early childhood education to make it a career of choice which supports the development of skills of our youngest Australians. We have millions on the table to fund public education at primary and high school level. We've changed the way HECS debts are calculated so that indexing never again rises more than the wage price index, and backdated it, reversing last year's increases. And massively oversubscribed fee-free TAFE, which has enabled Australians to access training in areas most at need: early childhood education, IT, and of course, tradies. And our new announcement, a re-elected Albanese Labor government will cut 20% of every HECS debt and will make fee-free TAFE permanent, because we're backing a future made in Australia and we're backing Australians.
Call member for Hinkler.
Thank you very much. Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise to acknowledge the incredible achievements of Angela Doyle Chalmers. Angela last month was inducted into Canada's Sports Hall of Fame at their 68th Annual Order of Sports Award, having already been inducted into the Athletics Canada Hall of Fame in 2019. Now, why am I talking about Angela Doyle, who's in the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame? Because Angela is a constituent and lives in Bundaberg, would you believe? And what an incredible record she has. She's married to Simon Doyle, a very well-known local, who himself is no slouch on the world stage in athletics. And, of course, their children, Michael and Emily, are on a farm near the hummock in Bundaberg. And to have someone of this standard in our local region, I think it deserves to be acknowledged. Angela was born to a Sioux woman and a soldier of Scottish-Canadian ancestry. She's a member of the Birdtail Sioux Nation and lived with her military family in various cities. She grew up racing against her brothers, and it was those races that taught her how to push herself to win. She has got an incredible list of achievements, and I won't get through them all, Mr Deputy Speaker. In 1990, she made history as the first female athlete to win gold in both the 1,500 metres and the 3,000 metre races at the Commonwealth Games in Auckland. At the 94 Commonwealth Games in Victoria, Canada, was the Canadian team flag bearer for the opening ceremony, and she defended her 3,000 metre gold medal in that Games. In the 92 Barcelona Olympics, she won bronze in the 3,000 metres. There is an incredible list, and congratulations, Angela. You deserve to be recognised.
Call a member for Newcastle.
Thank you. And I'd like to give a shout out to some local legends in my electorate of Newcastle who have been announced as finalists for the 21st Annual Health and Medical Research Awards. Professor Kelvin Kong AM from the University of Newcastle has been named as an Advocacy Award finalist for his role in improving health outcomes for First Nations people, particularly regarding the ear health of children in remote communities. Associate Professor Nicole Nathan, also from the University of Newcastle, has been named as a finalist for the Health Services Research Award for her expertise and dedication as a health promotion practitioner and her role in establishing the Hunter New England region as a hub for locally developed innovation. And Mark and Carolee Hughes from the Mark Hughes Foundation. They've been named finalists in the Philanthropy Award. The Foundation raises more much-needed funds for research, creates awareness and supports brain cancer patients and their families. To date, the Mark Hughes Foundation has raised close to $30 million. These prestigious awards honour the remarkable achievements of talented individuals and teams who drive innovation and advancements in health and medical research, enhancing all our lives. Thank you, Professor Kong, Associate Professor Nathan, and Mark and Carolee Hughes for your extraordinary efforts. Award winners will be announced at a ceremony in November. I wish you all the very best of luck.
In accordance with Standing Order 43, the time for members' statements has concluded, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business. Next order of the day, resumption of debate on a motion relating to infrastructure investment.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Curtin.
Thank you. I rise in support of the member for Wentworth's motion, urging the government to commit to a better, more transparent and responsive approach to infrastructure projects. This motion goes to two fundamental reforms about infrastructure: how we select big infrastructure projects and when we undertake them. Now, big infrastructure projects can be a useful economic management tool. In response to the COVID-19 economic downturn, the federal government made substantial commitments to infrastructure developments, as did state and territory governments. In theory, this was consistent with sound economic policy. When the economy is weak, that's the right time to stimulate it with big projects. But the Australian economy recovered far more quickly than expected. Now, this was obviously good news, but when it did, we didn't adjust the infrastructure decisions accordingly. So our current high-level infrastructure spending is in fact driving prices up. The 10-year, $120 billion infrastructure investment pipeline is now crowding out private sector investment. Multiple recent independent reviews have shown this. Big public projects should be timed to fill the troughs in the economic cycle rather than compete during construction sector peaks. Last year's independent review of the infrastructure investment program showed $33 billion in additional known cost pressures as a result of a clogged infrastructure pipeline. Now, this is currently particularly painful because we desperately need to build more homes and we need the people and materials to build them. At the moment, the housing sector, the mining sector, particularly in WA, and the clean energy sector are competing with large-scale infrastructure projects for construction sector workers. And while not all trades and skills are transferable between sectors, many are, and current strong employment conditions make it harder to expand the domestic construction workforce. Something's got to give. Some of the $120 billion of committed infrastructure projects should wait so that we can build the homes we need. Prioritising and scaling back infrastructure spending until we have sufficient resources, both labour and materials, to meet demand would stop pushing up prices for labour and materials and contribute to lowering inflation. It would mean that the most critical projects can be completed in shorter timeframes with less pressure on costs. And it would reduce pressure on the housing sector and stop crowding out private sector spending. But how would we prioritise infrastructure projects? Which are the best projects? Well, this question leads to the other big change proposed in this motion. I was absolutely floored when I found out that big infrastructure projects don't have to have a business case. That's right. Government can commit to spending hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars, without proving that the project is needed, that it will deliver benefits or that it's worth doing. Coming from the private sector, this is astounding. You can't spend shareholder money without justifying it. But when it comes to taxpayer money, if it's popular or the party in government at the moment wants it, that's good enough, even if it makes no actual sense. Governments should have to explain to the public, why are we doing this? What outcomes do we hope to achieve? How will we know if we've achieved these outcomes? Do the numbers stack up? Robust business cases should be required for all infrastructure projects and made public to allow for scrutiny and community oversight. An amendment to this effect was proposed by the member for Wentworth, which I backed, just for projects over $100 million, and it was rejected by both the major parties, who ultimately don't want the headache of actual accountability when they're in government. Also, after projects have been delivered, they should have to be evaluated. Can you believe they don't have to be? We never find out if a project actually achieved its goals. There's too little accountability when it comes to spending our money. If governments are spending taxpayer money, they should have to spend it well and spend it at the right time. We must focus on investments that improve the productive capacity of our economy and contribute to explicitly stated long-term goals, whether economic or social or environmental. This is particularly important now in an environment of high inflation with pressure on the budget in the medium to long term. I urge the government to respond to the 2 independent inquiries calling for better processes for infrastructure decisions, to do what any company must do and actually have a defensible business case for spending taxpayer money on infrastructure, and to pause non-essential infrastructure for now so that we can build the homes we need. We urgently need better transparency and accountability in our infrastructure projects.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call a member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the Albanese Labor government has reformed Australia's infrastructure pipeline, ensuring our investments in the nation's infrastructure grows so that the economy improves productivity and takes pressure off inflation. We all know infrastructure is an important part of ensuring that we have major projects that take place that assist and enhance our communities, whether it be roads, bridges or any other project, but also it ensures that it grows the economy and ensures that it produces positions and jobs for workers and enhances, as I said, the economy and the infrastructure of a particular area, whether it be a bridge or whether it be a road or other projects. Currently in my electorate, I'm very proud to have 3 major infrastructure projects and many, many more, but I'll speak about the 3 of them that I'll talk about today. And the first is the North-South Corridor, the Torrens to Darlington project, which was first announced back in 2013. I was there with the first sod turning when the current Prime Minister was the then Transport Minister. This project, $15.4 billion, goes straight through my electorate, through the South Road. And it's delivered in partnership with the State Government of South Australia, and it'll upgrade that North-South corridor between the River Torrens and Darlington, but specifically to my electorate from the River Torrens right through to approximately all the way down to Karrauta Park, Plympton area, which is an absolute congestion of motor vehicles from 6 a.m. in the morning right through to 8 to 9 p.m. every single day. So this motorway will ensure that it frees up traffic, allows people to save time on their trip to and from work. And when you add up even 10 minutes a day, that's 50 minutes at the end of the week. For some people who work 6 days, 60 minutes. And you think about that extra hour, 1 extra hour to either read to the children before they go to bed or help prepare for the dinner or spend quality time with your family. It makes a massive difference. Once finished, the Torrens to Darlington project will allow motorists to avoid 21 existing sets of traffic lights between River Torrens and Darlington, and will complete the non-stop 78-kilometre north-south corridor between Gawler and Old Noarlunga. Back in August, I was delighted to join with the Prime Minister, the Premier of South Australia and other members of state and federal parliaments that this project goes through their electorates to announce the preferred alliance partner to deliver South Australia's biggest ever infrastructure project. The Torrens to Darlington project will support approximately 5,500 jobs, Deputy Speaker, per year during main construction, with 90% of labour hours to be undertaken by South Australians, with an agreed minimum of 6% Indigenous employment on the project, 600 jobs for apprentices and trainees, and opportunities for more than 220 long-term unemployed people. Deputy Speaker, another exciting project is the $90 million, again 50-50 with the state government, Grange Road, Holbrooks Road and East Avenue intersection upgrade to relieve congestion and improve safety and connectivity for all road users at this location. The upgrade will remove a staggering intersection and create a direct connection across Grange Road between Holbrooks Road and East Avenue. And Deputy Speaker, I've spent over a decade writing to different transport ministers about this particular project, and I'm very pleased that this Labor government has listened and has made this announcement. This project, as I said, being delivered as part of an $850 million suite of projects, is designed to ensure Adelaide's road network functions efficiently during construction of the T2D project, in other words, Torrance to Darlington project. And once it's been completed, community engagement on the project is continuing, and I know that the community is excited about the upgrade, judging by the large turnout it's had its recent community meetings. Finally, I'd like to mention the tram grade separation project, and this will benefit the federal electorate of Adelaide and the federal electorate of Boothby and the electorate of Hindmarsh, with $600 million to remove 3 level crossings where the Glenelg tram line crosses Marion Road and Cross Road, Plimpton and Morford Road.
The time has expired. The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, order of the day number 2, resumption of debate on a motion relating to early childhood education.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Chisholm.
Yep. Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Gilmore for introducing this really important motion to the House. One of the great pleasures in this job is being able to visit our wonderful early learning centres in the electorate and meet some of our youngest citizens. And I recently had the pleasure of joining the Prime Minister in Mount Waverley at an early childhood education centre and visiting in Glen Iris with Minister Anne Ali. And it was truly a wonderful experience learning from the children and seeing how they learn and that their minds are being sharpened through play. It was great to read stories with the children and share in singing with them too. Our government, of course, recognises the transformative benefits of early childhood education and care for children and families. And I want to thank families and I want to thank educators at this point too for their incredible advocacy in pushing governments like ours to take steps to properly recognise and remunerate the work that gets done in the sector every day. We're working to build a universal early childhood education and care system that is accessible for all families, no matter their circumstances or background. We've already taken some critical first steps in this regard, including to make early childhood education more affordable for over 1 million families through our cheaper childcare reforms. And our government also recognises that early learning educators and teachers do a vital job, making it possible for millions of other Australians to do their job too, and supporting young children's early learning and development. As the Productivity Commission reports has stated, we must prioritise the early learning workforce before any major reforms, and that's exactly why we've made a historic announcement for a 15% wage increase for early childhood education workers. And since coming to government, the early childhood education and care sector has grown by more than 30,000 workers. And that's because our government is working with the sector to develop and deliver practical solutions to retain staff while continuing to develop and strengthen recruitment and training pathways. So we already have provided more university places for early childhood education teachers and fee-free TAFE. We have helped deliver a 4.6% pay rise from July of 2022, a 5.75% pay rise from July 2023, and a 3.7% pay rise from July of this year. And we commissioned the ACCC and Productivity Commission inquiry into the early childhood education and care system. We've also invested $72.4 million to support the skills and training of a quality and sustainable early childhood education and care sector. Our workforce package is helping build skills and strengthen the supply of qualified early childhood education and care workers, including through supporting professional development opportunities and paid prac placements.
This investment means that high-quality early learning educators remain in the sector and making it easier for educators to progress their careers. And, Deputy Speaker, don't just take my word for it. We have heard from educators right around the country. Lisa, who's an early childhood educator in New South Wales, has said that this is a monumental history-making moment. This means that I can stay in the job that I love and know that it's going to change a lot of lives, not just my own. Here's some words from Karen, an early childhood educator in Queensland. This means the changes that the Albanese government are bringing in means that early childhood educators who've been relying on food bank to feed their families won't have to do that anymore. And those that work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet will be able to spend more time with their families. And here are some words from Sia, an early childhood educator from my home state of Victoria. Instead of searching for a second job, this pay increase will help me now pay rent and put food on my table. The work educators do is not just important for themselves, putting a roof over their heads, but for our communities. It enables more parents to participate in the workforce, and of course we know the first 5 years of a child's life are so vital to their learning. And so this is setting up the youngest people in our communities for the very best start in life. And I'm so pleased at the efforts of our government to recognise the importance of this sector. Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for North Sydney.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. You know, it's pretty much universally agreed in my electorate of North Sydney that those working in the early childhood education and care sector play a vital role in supporting families and parents right across our community. In 2021, 93% of workers in the early childhood education and care industry identified as female, adding this profession to a long list of female-dominated work environments that are not properly valued by our society or governments in general. As I stand to speak to this motion then today, I think the real question for this parliament is, has it done enough to fundamentally shift our nation's mindset to one which truly values those working in the care economy? After all, following a decade of coalition governments, many would argue this sector and the families that rely on it have never been so pressed. As cost of living pressures close in on everyone, and professionals in the area leave in droves because both their salary and career progression prospects are so poor. As I've said, my community fundamentally believes every childhood educator and carer plays an essential role in shaping our society. Not only do they teach and nurture our kids in their formative years, but their very existence helps drive our economy as they enable millions of Australian parents, most often women, to return to work and pursue the careers they wish to. Despite this contribution, however, for far too long, early childhood education and care workers have been appallingly underpaid, contributing to the high turnover and one of the largest unfilled vacancy ratios in any occupation in the country. To navigate this complex problem and identify potential policy solutions then, I recently hosted the North Sydney Early Childhood Education and Care Deliberative Democracy Forum. With 40 residents from North Sydney randomly selected from a wider group of 5,000 invited, the forum was demographically representative of my electorate. The deliberations of this group then drew upon both expert input and community submissions to build a community consensus on what they wanted to see me fighting for in this place. By coming to a consensus on a federal policy position that could effectively address affordability and accessibility in this sector, the forum really did unlock my community's thinking. To help inform their views, participants heard from a range of experts, including those from Early Childhood Australia, the Australia Institute, Australian Childcare Alliance, New South Wales, the Centre for Policy Development and the Centre for Research in Early Childhood Education at Macquarie University, with the potential solutions discussed including everything from government-funded universal access to early education and care places for all children from birth, through to strategies to deal with the discrepancy in remuneration structures for early childhood educators employed in preschools versus those employed in primary schools. The ultimate result of those deliberations made it really clear. My community of North Sydney wants to see early childhood education and care valued more appropriately and not just relegated to women's work. Specifically, they told me they wanted to see free or low-cost access to early childhood education and care integrated into the existing education system and offered universally for all families for children from birth, regardless of where the family lives or their socio-economic status. They advocated that while as a society we've come to value education as a basic right for young people, we haven't taken the steps to expand our universal system to cover the early years. They also told me they believe I should be advocating strongly that the early childhood education and care workforce be paid an award commensurate with that of primary school teachers. And finally, they also want to see early childhood education and care facilities built alongside new public primary schools to ensure adequate supply. Ultimately, communities like mine, where families pay some of the most expensive childcare fees in the country at an average of nearly $190 per day per child, want to see early childhood education and care sector recognised and workers properly valued. So while the government's recent move to raise the wages of early childhood education and care workers is welcome, it is just the first step in a reform process that is well past due. After all, the 15% wage increase will still not bring the average earnings of an early childhood educator and care worker into line with primary school teachers, nor will increasing wages necessarily prevent burnout or increase retention rates, as the lure of employment in the primary school sector will remain. Finally, although the government's 4.4% fee cap conditions are admirable in trying to ensure wage increases don't necessarily translate to increased fees for families, it does nothing to address how expensive this sector already is in my community. Put simply, early childhood education and care is essential, and people working in that area deserve the respect that is due to them. Thank you.
Thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member from Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It goes without saying that the Albanese government recognises the transformative benefits of early childhood education and care for both children and their families. Now, I should say it should go without saying, but in this place we are still required to remind all members that it is a really transformative thing to do, to have quality early childhood education. We know those first 5 years are vital. We know that on this side. We know the crossbench, by and large, appreciates that as well. We know, though, that there are people in this place who do not hold that view. They are not listening to the science, but we are. And we're working to build a universal early childhood education and care system that is accessible to every family, no matter what their circumstances or background. We've already taken some critical first steps, including to make early childhood education more affordable for more than 1 million families through our cheaper childcare reforms. But we know that there's more to do to provide long-term, sustainable support to parents. And I say to people who don't have children, don't think that this is not relevant to you. I say to those people, early learning educators and teachers do an absolutely vital job, yes, for the families and the children involved, but they make it possible for millions of other Australians to do their jobs too. So if you're a small business or a big business, your workers need to have access to quality, affordable childcare. The fact is we're still not producing enough early educators or keeping enough of them in the system. Since coming to government, Australia's early childhood education and care sector has grown by more than 30,000 workers, and that's because our government's working with the sector to develop and deliver practical solutions to retain staff while continuing to develop and strengthen recruitment and training pathways. We've already provided more university places for early childhood education teachers and fee-free TAFE. We've helped deliver a 4.6% pay rise from July 2022 and a 5.75% pay rise from July 2023 and a 3.7% pay rise from July 2024. We've commissioned the ACCC and the Productivity Commission inquiry into the entire early childhood education and care system. We've also invested $72.4 million to support the skills and training of quality and sustainable early childhood education and care. Our workforce package is helping build skills and strengthen the supply of qualified educators, including through supporting professional development opportunities and paid prac. Now, all of these things are key, and as the Productivity Commission states, we must prioritise the early learning workforce before any major reforms, and that's why we've made an historic announcement for a 15% wage increase for early childhood workers. This is a vital investment by the Albanese government to ensure high-quality early childhood educators remain in the sector and making it easier for educators to progress their careers. I want to see every eligible early learning educator in Macquarie receive that 15% pay rise. But I am aware of the challenges that small not-for-profit or small private providers, both long daycare centres and ushers, are facing in the implementation of the increase. I was very pleased to host a roundtable discussion last week with departmental officials where directors and key executive of local centres could frankly raise their issues and ask questions. I'm also grateful to the support offered by the United Workers Union to assist these small centres. Now, we haven't solved all the implementation issues yet, and I'll continue to work with local providers across the Blue Mountains, the Hawkesbury and Emu Plains region to get it right. While the 15% increase is not the end of the improvements to conditions for early childhood workers, it's an interim step while other reforms take place, and I don't want anyone to miss out on that $100 a week increase before Christmas. So overall, we're talking about a 15% pay rise over 2 years, starting in December this year, 10% initially to increase by 15% a year later. The really key thing for me is that we want to see providers pass all that money on to the workers. That's who deserves
The member's
it.
time has expired. I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Wannon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to give voice to the deep concerns of families with young children across my electorate of Wannon. Accessible and affordable childcare is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And yet for people in regional and rural Australia, and especially my electorate of Wannon, there is not the availability that is needed. And what this is meaning is, in particular, young mums are missing out on being able to access the workforce like they should be able to. And not only are young mums missing out, but businesses across my electorate are missing out because they're not able to employ these young mothers who they need to work in their businesses. So this is a double whammy which is occurring. And what have we seen from both the federal Labor government and the state Labor government in Victoria? Everything that they are doing is working against childcare availability for especially young mothers in the electorate of Wannon. We've seen the federal government do nothing about broadening access to childcare. We've now had green droughts in the electorate of Wannon and right across Australia when it comes to childcare, which the government has done nothing about and hasn't even tried to address it. And in Victoria, it's got even worse because the Labor state government earlier this year revealed a very different reality for regional and rural families. They had promised to expand access to childcare and to build centres in key towns in my electorate. And what have we found out? These have now been delayed, and not only delayed for months, but for delayed in sometimes for up to a decade. Now, we haven't got time to wait for that sort of delay, and these types of false promises that we are seeing all the time from the state Labor government and now from the federal Labor government are doing nothing to improve the availability of childcare in my electorate. So I say to the Albanese Labor government, please, please, think about what you need to do to provide availability to childcare right across this nation. Don't just think about the capital cities. Think about what you need to be doing right across our country. Because if you're able to provide greater childcare in our regions, in our country towns, in towns like Warrnambool and Port Fairy and Portland and Hamilton and Colac, what it means is that businesses can grow and develop there. Economies get stronger in those communities get stronger, and it takes some of the pressure off our capital cities, and it takes some of the pressure off the growth in population that we're seeing in those places, and the crowded infrastructure and the crowded access to hospitals and everything else which comes from that. And so what you need to be doing is making sure that you are focused on not only ensuring that people are paid properly when it comes to providing childcare service, and we're all in agreement with that, but making sure that there is that availability there where young mums in particular need it. And so that is my request to this government, is to make sure that you're putting the policies in place which will enable childcare to grow. Now, the previous speaker talked about the pressure being put on our small not-for-profit childcare providers. And that is something that the government also needs to look at and also needs to pay attention to. Because if you put pressure on those smaller not-for-profit providers, then what you are doing is harming in particular the provision of childcare in regional and rural Victoria, and you won't see it develop and enhance. And I'll end on this point. You also need to be able to provide emergency services quickly when needed. And the Cassidy Childcare Centre, which was hit by a severe hailstorm 2 weeks ago, really needs your help. You need to step in and help them at this moment as well.
I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Moreton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member for Gilmore for moving this motion. I'm pleased to have an opportunity to voice my support for Australia's wonderful early childhood educators and carers, and to thank them for their hard work. Moreton has some fantastic early childhood education centres. In fact, I live across the road from one of them, the one that my sons went to, so I never had a great journey in terms of the double drop-off. I just went across the pedestrian crossing. But they're all great places to visit. I'm always inspired by the educators and carers and their dedication and enthusiasm about their work. It's great to see the children having fun while learning. These centres provide a rich learning environment for the 1.8 million Australian children aged 0 to 5, that crucial period for brain, language and social development. These years are the building blocks for good health, education and wellbeing for school and later in life. Quality early learning programs provide children with better educational outcomes also. This includes improved literacy and numeracy skills, greater engagement in schooling and completion of school, and ultimately higher paying jobs. And the best part is that children at these centres are achieving this vital groundwork via play and having fun, the core business of childhood. We recognise the importance of this and in turn the importance of supporting the workforce that makes this possible. That's why early childhood educators and carers will receive a 15% pay increase over the next 2 years this increase is real and tangible cost of living relief for early childhood education workers, as well as an acknowledgement of how much the Labor government values their work. It amounts to $3.5 billion investment from the Commonwealth Government and will see an increase of between 100 to 150 per week for typical workers from December this year, just next month. Deputy Speaker, it's vital that we invest in this workforce. We need to retain experienced professionals and attract more workers. I'm pleased to say that since May 22, the sector has grown by more than 30,000 employees. They've been drawn by more university places for early childhood teachers and the fee-free TAFE initiative. Having a thriving early childhood education sector is essential
not only for our children, but it's a key part of our economy. After all, early childhood educators enable other Australians with young children to go out and do their own jobs. And thanks to Labor initiatives, doing this has become more economical for families right across Australia. There are over 1.2 million families benefiting from our cheaper childcare reforms. This has reduced the average out-of-pocket costs for centre-based daycare by 11%. It makes it so much more affordable for mums and dads to work or to do training or study. We've also linked the pay rise for early childhood educators to a condition that early childhood education centres do not increase their fees by more than 4.4% from August 24 for the following year. And we're working on a new index for the year following that. This ensures that families are not faced with fee hikes and that the funding goes to the centre's employees' pay packets. The Labor government's ultimate goal is the provision of a universal early childhood education and care system, something we're working towards steadily, methodically and with significant progress. We commissioned the ACCC and the Productivity Commission to inquire into the early childhood education and care system to guide further reforms, and these findings will be considered over the coming months. With the goal of universal early childhood education and care in mind, we know what's required is evidence-based, long-term strategies and investment. We want it to be accessible, affordable and inclusive, and we'll work collaboratively to achieve this in the city and the bush. I'll leave my final words to the Centre Manager for an early childhood education centre in my home suburb of Maruka. Karen said, and I quote Karen, "The 15% pay increase for early childhood educators is a great first step for the early childhood sector in recognising and acknowledging the work that we do and supporting the retention of people in our sector. Importantly, I feel it makes approved providers more accountable for fee increases, providing transparency, something historically that has not occurred. It supports families with affordability in this current economic climate and truly gives back to the many educators who work tirelessly each and every day to deliver quality care and education to our most precious little humans." End of quote. Thank you, Karen, for your words and for the great work that you and your peers, your colleagues do. And thank you to all early childhood educators across Moreton and across this nation. I can't think of a group in society more deserving of that 15% pay increase.
I thank the member. There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next day of sitting. I call the clerk.
Private Members Notice number 5 relating to genetic screening, standing in the name of Mr Pearce.
And I call the member for Braddon.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to genetic screening in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Deputy Speaker, our nation's health statistics are confronting. Our world-class health professionals are working tirelessly, yet patients still struggle to get the treatment that they so desperately need. And today, Deputy Speaker, we're honoured to have Professor Jane Tiller, an expert in her field, with us in the gallery, so welcome to the good professor. It's time, Deputy Speaker, to rethink our approach to healthcare and to consider one that focuses on prevention and the early identification of risk factors before disease manifests. Today, I wish to update the House on the potential of preventive genomic testing in reducing disease burdens across the entire country. A shift from a reactive to a proactive form of healthcare. Genomic testing analyses a person's DNA in order to identify genetic predispositions to certain diseases. For high-risk individuals and their families, having this information early can be life-saving. It would allow the time to take preventative actions, for instance, regular monitoring or early treatment, or in some cases even preventative surgery, Deputy Speaker. This would not only lead to better outcomes, fewer hospitalisations, but also a significant reduction in long-term healthcare costs. The case for increased investment in preventative healthcare has never been more pressing. Currently, only about 2% of Australia's healthcare budget is directed towards preventative measures. This contrasts with potential savings from early detection. Genomic testing offers promising investment opportunities for that investment, particularly for conditions such as cancer, and heart disease, which have significant health and economic impacts. Deputy Speaker, limiting funding restricts genomic testing to a narrow post-symptom criteria, and yet genomic testing's greatest advantage is the identification well before that. The current criteria-based approach is failing to identify our most high-risk individuals, leaving them unaware and without access to preventative measures. This result is resulting in lives consumed by poor health, deaths that could have been prevented, and a heartache for families for those that lose loved ones. But we could change the scenario, Deputy Speaker. We have the access to this technology that could save lives. The DNA screen study led by Monash University is a recent example of genomic testing's incredible potential. The study screened over 10,000 young adults for genetic risks linked to cancer and heart disease. It revealed that 3/4 of those identified as high risk would not have qualified for funded testing under the current criteria. That's 3 in 4, Deputy Speaker. 3 in 4 missing out, Deputy Speaker. This highlights a critical gap in our health system that the government has an opportunity to address. The biggest fear associated with DNA testing is whether life insurance companies can discriminate based on these results. And I welcome the government's legislative ban announced in September. This would ensure Australians can undergo genetic testing without insurance concerns. That legislation hasn't been introduced as yet, but hopefully we'll see that in the near future. The Senate Standing Committee on Community Affairs has also recognised the potential of genetic testing and recommended monitoring of the outcomes of DNA screen study, which has, as well as exploring future investment in population-scale genetic testing and screening. We should heed this call. By expanding genomic testing and making it accessible to a broader population, we can detect these diseases earlier, manage risk proactively and save lives. At the same time, we need to prepare our health system in order to meet the increased demand that population-wide genetic screening will bring. We must strengthen the infrastructure for downstream services and risk management in order to ensure that high-risk individuals receive timely and appropriate care. Deputy Speaker, adult preventative genomic testing represents a significant opportunity.
Hear, hear.
I mentioned the Monash study. Of the 10,000 participants, 24 were from my electorate of Braddon, and one of the 202 high-risk individuals lives in our region. Disease does not discriminate. This investment shifts us from a reactive to a preventative care, empowering individuals to take control of their health. And I call on the government to implement.
Members' time has expired. Is the motion seconded?
It certainly is, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'll speak after the next.
Reserve your right to speak. Thank the member for Leichhardt. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Higgins.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This Albanese government supports expansion of genetic testing to improve the early detection of diseases in Australians, help them quantify their risk and modify it through lifestyle choices or medical interventions. As an indication of support for genetic testing, in September this year we announced a landmark reform driven by the advocacy of Dr Jane Tiller, who is here present with us, and colleagues at Monash University, as well as community advocates like Rare Diseases, Rare Voices Australia. We did this to end the ability to discriminate against an adverse predictive genetic test, and as a result we have banned its use in life insurance underwriting. This change will give Australians the confidence to undertake genetic testing without fear that it will impact their ability to access financial security through life insurance. Rare diseases, Deputy Speaker, affect 2% of Australians, accounting for 2 million Australians, accounting for 8% of the population. Actually, rare diseases collectively are not that rare. 80% of these diseases are genetic in origin, with the rest being non-genetically linked cancers, infections and autoimmune diseases. That should give you an indication of the potential for DNA screening against an entire population. However, delayed diagnosis with respect to rare diseases is the norm, and this includes those cancers that are associated with these genetically related problems. In fact, 30% of adults have a diagnosis delayed by 5 years. This, in turn, leads to poor outcomes, exacerbating the stress and anxiety, as well as the financial cost felt by patients and carers. Ovarian cancer is an example. Due to the non-specific symptoms like abdominal bloating and a lack of an early detection test, around 70% of ovarian cancers are diagnosed late. Consequently, the average 5-year survival rate for ovarian cancer in patients is quite poor at 49%, compared to 92% for breast cancer, 84% for uterine cancer, and 74% for cervical cancer. DNA Screen at Monash University tests for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, Lynch syndrome, and heart disease. With funding of $3 million, DNA Screen has tested over 10,000 18 to 40-year-olds. 2% were found to be at high risk, 1 person in my electorate of Higgins. DNA Screen now proposes to scale this up to 100,000 people, requiring approximately $50 million in investment as a precursor to a nationwide screening program. This is truly an ambitious plan. I guess the questions raised are also significant. Arguably, screening is the easiest part of the equation, but how then will the results be managed? We don't have enough genetic counsellors, and GPs do not have the time nor the expertise to fill this gap. Do we have the diagnostic capacity from imaging, as well as radiologists and pathologists, proceduralists, to perform the inevitable scopes or biopsies on these patients? We would need to ensure that the downstream impacts on the healthcare providers and the health workforce and the hospital system are manageable. These and other questions are now being dealt with by the Health Department as well as DNA Screen. The Albanese government is investing in genomic research and genetic screening in Australia. $66 million is going towards genomic research, including testing of 500 children with cerebral palsy. We are looking to screen 1,000 patients with Parkinson's disease. We're looking to test for more rapid diagnosis and identification of epilepsy in infants, and to improve blood pressure treatment according to a patient's genetic profile. Each of the 25 projects will receive up to $3 million in funding. And in August this year, Assistant Minister Jed Carney announced that $5.5 million will be going to establish a newborn screening program for illnesses at birth, including haemophilia, cystic fibrosis, and spinal muscular dystrophy. Through the Australian Cancer Plan, the Albanese government wants to improve cancer care in Australia. Genetic testing has great potential in early detection of a range of diseases, in breaking the back of delayed diagnosis for rare diseases as well as rare cancers. Whatever model is finally adopted needs to be equitable, above the postcode lottery, with the capacity of the health workforce to be able to meet the needs of these patients. And it must also be cost effective to ensure that taxpayers get bang for their buck. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Leichhardt.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to lend my very strong support to this motion and emphasise the amazing potential of genetic screening to help us tackle cancer and other diseases. By implementing proactive population-wide genetic screening, we have an unprecedented opportunity to identify Australians at high genetic risk for certain diseases before the symptoms emerge, providing a pathway to better prevention, to save lives and significantly reduce healthcare costs. For those people who carry specific genetic markers like the BRCA1 and the BRCA2, they face up to a 70% risk of breast cancer, often at a younger age, and these cancers are also typically more aggressive. Another example is Lynch syndrome, which leads to a 50% lifetime risk of bowel cancer in both men and women. For those with these genetic markers, much earlier and more frequent screening, such as MRIs or annual, goodness me, I'll be travelling, goodness me, colonoscomies. Sorry, I do appreciate it. I've had a long 3 days. No, I have not, but are necessary to catch diseases at their most treatable stage. By adopting a more widespread genetic testing approach, we will not only save lives but also save taxpayers and the health system a lot of money in the process. I must acknowledge the work of Monash University, which continues to illustrate the importance of DNA screening and more equitable approach for all Australians. And again, it's nice to see you here, Professor Tiller, in our gallery. For over 10,000 young adults tested at Monash's DNA screen pilot, around 2% were found to be of high genetic risk for cancers and heart disease. This is not rare, Madam Deputy Speaker. It equates to about 1 in every 50 Australians, a significant number of whom have not been eligible for existing testing due to restrictive criteria. At least 42 participants in this study came from my electorate of Leichhardt, and one of the identified high-risk individuals is also from my region. This reinforces the reach and relevance of this issue across all of our communities. Despite the powerful evidence in favour of proactive genetic screening, the current approach remains largely reactive, and testing often occurring only after someone has been diagnosed with either cancer or heart disease. This is a missed opportunity to keep people healthy, out of hospitals and actively participating in our workforce. By shifting to a proactive preventative model, we can empower Australians with the knowledge that they need to safeguard their health and to alleviate strain on our healthcare system. I'm sure it's very clear now that this information, that we can unlock through genetic testing is quite powerful, and we should be mindful that it should only be used for the benefit of for Australians. So I commend the government on its recent announcement regarding their intent to ban the use of genetic testing results in life insurance underwriting. Without this protection, too many Australians fear genetic testing, worrying that the high risk result could affect their ability to be able to secure insurance. I note that the Assistant Treasurer has previously confirmed the government's intention to pass this legislation within the current term, and if we're going to make this a reality, we really need to get a move on this very, very quickly. So I urge the government to keep the promise to protect Australians, and let's get this legislation drafted and bring it into the House without any delays. Economic modelling from Monash University has also illustrated the widespread adaptation of the proactive genetic screening approach in Australia would be very cost-effective at a price that could soon be achievable as little as $400 per person. It's a very small price to pay for such a significant benefit. It would represent a unique opportunity to bring our healthcare system into the 21st century. This is not about gene editing or designer babies. It's about practical evidence-based interventions to identify those who are at risk of cancer and other diseases and provide them with the preventative care that they need. I certainly commend the member for Braddon on this motion, and I look forward to accelerating the progress on this very, very important issue.
Thank the member. The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Our government's commitment to advancing preventative healthcare is steadfast, and it's grounded in our belief that every Australian deserves access to a world-class healthcare system through their Medicare card, not their credit card. And as a government, we absolutely recognise the promise genetics and genomics hold in transforming how we prevent, diagnose and treat disease. We are taking significant steps to ensure that these scientific advancements remain a source of empowerment and not of discrimination. A prime example is Minister Jones's recent announcement on a total ban on the use of adverse genetic testing results in life insurance. This is a landmark decision that ensures Australians can seek clarity on their health risks without fearing discrimination by insurers. And on this matter, I'd like to share a story from a constituent in Bennelong who contacted me throughout this process. I'll respectfully refer to her as Jane to protect her medical privacy. Jane's experience illustrates how deeply these issues impact Australian families. After losing her parent to cancer and watching her close relative battle terminal ovarian cancer, Jane chose to undergo genetic testing for the BRCA2 mutation. Her motivation was clear: to give her 3 young children the gift of knowledge and possibility of preventative action. Jane made this choice out of love, seeking to empower herself and her children with information her own mother never had. But in doing so, Jane was faced with an unexpected and heartbreaking choice. She was informed just before her testing that taking the genetic test could impact her children's ability to obtain life insurance in the future. Jane was warned that the results of her test, meant to empower her children, could instead become a barrier to their future financial security. As a parent who would do anything for her children, this was devastating news. It is totally unfair that someone who took proactive steps to manage her family's health risk should face a decision where vital knowledge comes at the cost of her children's future security. That's why Minister Jones' recent announcement banning the use of adverse genetic testing results in life insurance is so significant. People like Jane and her children will no longer have to face these difficult choices in seeking genetic information just to protect their own health and the health of their children. This ban sends a clear message that genetic testing is a tool for empowerment and not a tool to discriminate. Australians like Jane will soon be able to pursue testing and take preventative steps without fearing that it will limit their children's opportunities for security later in life. Because genetic screening offers benefits beyond individual health. It has the potential to reduce the financial strain on our healthcare system by identifying at-risk individuals before conditions develop, saving costs associated with late-stage disease treatment. The government also recognises that the benefits of genetic screening extend beyond individual health outcomes. By identifying high-risk individuals early, governments can alleviate some of the strain on our healthcare system. Preventative health measures save lives, but they also reduce the long-term costs of treating advanced disease. Health economic modelling consistently demonstrates that preventative interventions lead to significant cost savings. This approach frees up resources to address other critical areas within our healthcare system, making it more resilient and responsive to Australians' needs. By expanding genetic screening, we can build a future where the healthcare system is both more sustainable and better prepared to address unique health risks of our population. Organisations like Pathology Australia are essential partners in our preventative healthcare efforts. Their work ensures that Australians have access to reliable diagnostic and preventative services, including genetic testing. Pathology Australia's role exemplifies the importance of collaboration in creating a healthcare system that is accessible, comprehensive and proactive. And by working together with such organisations, we can strengthen our diagnostic pathways and enhance Australians' access to life-saving information. As a government, we're committed to ensuring that our investments in preventative health are aligned with protecting the rights of Australians. Genetic testing can be a transformative tool, empowering Australians to make informed choices about their health, but this power must come with a guarantee of fairness and protection. The recent ban on genetic discrimination is a good step forward. We'll continue working alongside experts like Dr. Tiller here and all the work she's done. I commend this motion and calls for expanded genomic testing and research.
I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Braddon, my good friend and colleague, for moving this important motion, which we discussed earlier in the year within the Coalition. And I particularly commend the efforts of Monash University through DNA Screen, a study funded by the Medical Research Future Fund, led by Professor Paul Lacaze and Dr. Jane Tiller, who is in the gallery. With some pride, I must add that it was the former Coalition government in 2021 that awarded $2.97 million through the MRFF for this study, searching initially for hereditary breast and ovarian cancer and Lynch syndrome. A key takeaway point for me as the Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Health is responsibility within the Nationals for federal health policy, which in large part is about primary and preventative care, as the states generally manage but don't fully fund acute care. This is the profound potential for DNA Screen to promote preventative health care. As the motion reads, it's very encouraging that so many young people have participated in DNA Screen's trial. The more we encourage all generations, particularly the younger generation, to change the culture around personal health, the better. We in the slightly older generation might spend more on upkeep of our homes, motor vehicles or other assets than we do on our own health. Even the money some spend on private health cover may be more motivated in being able to quickly address urgent care situations than engaging with preventative care available under private health policies. Primary and preventative care is also very important in regional Australia due to the lack of urgent care locally. That is the distance you have to travel, and in some cases hours, to actually get urgent care. Screening can help identify health problems well before they become apparent and reduce the need for regional patients to be away from home for weeks or months on end for treatment because disease has been picked up too late. This pilot program, if funded, would potentially see saliva testing kits sent out to homes. I hope, as Shadow Minister, that regional Australians will be able to send those test kits in and be on the same status as urban Australians. The last thing that we want from a program is an outcome that exacerbates what is already a dire disparity between urban and non-urban Australian health outcomes. I acknowledge the advocacy of Dr Tiller for some time on preventing life insurance companies from discriminating against those who have genetic screening. It is pleasing that the government has committed to move on this issue, and we will consider this further in the coming months. Certainly, the uptake of screening will improve if people do not fear negative outcomes on life insurance for being screened in the first place. I have to note that it seems very odd indeed to punish people for taking preventative care steps. Why would you disincentivise discovering risks by making it harder for people to access life insurance? Surely, where there is risk, there is a cost threshold to manage that risk. The fact insurance companies were looking to not insure people if they had DNA markers is disgraceful, and I am pleased that this will be stopped. Thank you.
I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Hasler.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Genetic screening sounds like something out of a science fiction. For the more suspicious amongst us, it can even sound Orwellian. It's certainly part of our future, though, in one way or another. And that means we have to be both on our intellectual and moral toes. Genetics and genomics have enormous potential to shape the way we prevent, diagnose and treat illness, and it is, I think, a power for good. I received a heartfelt note from Ms Troth, whose family, thanks to screening, identified a CHEK2 gene mutation, which means there is double the chance of developing a range of cancers such as breast, bowel and ovarian within her family. These legislative actions that we're taking will mean that the Troth family and others will be able to engage not just in screening, but then to take the necessary preventative health actions without facing financial discrimination. Our government has provided $3 million under the Medical Research Future Fund for the DNA Screen pilot study led by Monash University. This study has offered free DNA screening for high-risk hereditary disease gene variants to 10,000 young Australians. Over 20,000 people registered in the first 3 days, double the allocation, and there are now 30,000 to date. DNA Screen updates the Department of Health and Aged Care and the Health Minister. The discussions and the work have considered an enormous range of issues. And we've been sensitive to the dangers of discrimination based on adverse predictive genetic testing results, and our government is committed to banning their use in life insurance underwriting. We don't want people to be frightened away from testing that could ultimately save their life by the fear that the information could then be used against them and to their financial detriment. We're ensuring that medical practitioners are enabled to help people everywhere in preventing, diagnosing, treating and monitoring heritable conditions. And we did this by the means that works best. We consulted and we listened. We received more than 1,000 submissions and 97% of them supported a total ban on the use of results in a way that threatened the availability of life insurance. In 5 years' time, we'll look to review this ban just to make sure there were no unintended consequences, because that's, of course, what responsible governments do. And we're proud to note that the Council of Australian Life Insurance has in fact declared its full support, because they see it as good for Australians, good for government and good for industry too. And this is what happens when you strive to take people along with you, as the Albanese government does, rather than trying to sow discord. Notwithstanding the Coalition's failure to act in this area while in office, which we saw across so many portfolios, I hope that this motion signifies that our legislation will have broad support. On a personal note, I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Jane Tiller of Monash, who did so much to enlighten us here in not just this area, but more broadly too, and for your continued advocacy, fighting fiercely for people who suffer from adverse genetic conditions. The Australian Genetics and Life Insurance Moratorium Monitoring the Effectiveness and Response Study, known as the Genomic report, delivered last year, alerted us all. It found that genetic discrimination was occurring in life insurance and was indeed deterring people from seeking, testing and engaging in what could be life-enhancing research. I congratulate you, Jane, on being named as the finalist for Research Australia's Advocacy Award. Our commitment to genomic research continues. Under the Albanese government, a further $66 million has been invested, along with $5.5 million for newborn screening of genetic disorders. We are also committed, as we are in all aspects of life, to equitable access. All Australians must have access to methods which are critical to tackling disease prevention. Investment in prevention in all its aspects is vital to sustainable healthcare systems and to national wellbeing. Healthy children are much more likely to be healthy adults, and people who have received sound healthcare advice are much more likely to live into healthy senior years. And this is why we're committed as a Labor government to strengthening Medicare. Every time the Coalition is in government, it suffers damage and neglect. The repair job is underway, and this week we can already see our investment starting to work, and we won't ever give up on it. We're expanding the network of Medicare urgent care clinics across the country. I think it's up to 75 now. It's hard to keep track, but we only promised 50. There are new bulk bill clinics that are open 7 days a week with extended hours, and we're making bigger than ever investment in bulk billing, which does take a hit every time the Coalition takes office. This new investment is helping more than 11 million children under 16, pensioners, concession card holders to see doctors free of charge.
Time has expired. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Spence.
Thank you, Speaker. Preventative healthcare through genetic screening and testing to determine risk factors present within patients has the potential to save lives. That aspect of these practices alone has meant research in this area could have enormous value for our country. This is something the member for Braddon understands, for which I commend him, and it's something the Albanese Labor government values too. We want Australians in a position where they can identify their genetic risk of developing serious illness, such as types of cancer as well as heart disease, before these conditions develop. And we want this because lives and livelihoods are profoundly affected by diagnosis of cancer and other debilitating rare conditions on a daily basis in this country. Cancer alone is estimated to account for 3 of every 10 deaths in Australia in 2024. It doesn't need to be said that such illnesses can be absolutely shattering for individuals and their families. And I draw on my own personal experience in making that statement. Cancer's reached into my family's lounge room on a number of occasions, and in my workplace, where I recently lost one of my best mates, my former boss, Ian Smith, who lost his fight with bowel cancer back in July this year. But I also think about my cousin who failed to reach his 40th birthday, who was struck down with leukaemia, cruelly leaving behind his wife and 4 children. Breast cancers hit my family on a number of occasions, most recently with my sister-in-law Marta, taking her in her mid-30s. But I also have had the misfortune of losing my father 7 years ago at the back end of what was complicated heart conditions, and subsequently found abdominal aortic aneurysm, something that can be genetically linked, and something that I have to go and get a ultrasound every 2 years on to make sure I don't have one. It's something that my 2 sisters have to do to make sure that we keep ourselves in good health. And this is what happens when you don't have access to these types of testing, where you can be walking around quite blindly to the fact that you may have something wrong, and the inability to be able to have that treated in a prompt way may cut your life short. So these experiences like mine, they're felt by families nationwide. There's not many across this country that haven't been touched in some way by one of these diseases, and why they're also the reason why we provided $3 million to the DNA screen pilot study led by the Monash University under the government's Medical Research Fund. Because if there's an opportunity for just one Australian to detect such an illness early, to prevent a form of cancer or rare disease from becoming life-limiting, that is worth researching. And I'm proud to be part of a government that's providing the funding to do so. As a member for Braddon rightly points out as well, that pilot attracted much interest, with 20,000 young Australians registering in just the first 3 days alone. And of those who were tested under the pilot so far, 2% of them returned a result indicating a high genetic risk of serious illness. So already, those are tested individuals who were found to be at a higher risk. Their future wellbeing is now that much more secure because of this research alone. It's exciting, to say the least, and it's why our government continues to engage warmly with the team at DNA Screen as it progresses. Related to the preventative measures in improving Australian health is an unfortunate byproduct that has been termed genetic discrimination within the insurance industry. This refers to an increase of life insurance fees or outright rejection of a life insurance claim, where an individual has an identified genetic risk to their health and it's damaging practice. It effectively changes individuals for taking preventative steps to look after themselves, and that has subsequent effect of discouraging people from taking genetic tests to avoid a price hike. So a test which could save a life suddenly becomes a cost-benefit analysis for Australians under these practices, and isn't something a person should need to consider when taking that step. That genetic discrimination has been done away with under the Albanese Labor government, having implemented a total ban on the practice, because no Australian, no family in this country should be discouraged from taking care of themselves. And this policy goes hand in hand with our long-standing commitment to genetic and genomic research investment in this country, having invested $66 million into genomic research alongside $5.5 million into newborn screening of genetic disorders. I just want to take the time to thank Dr. Jane Tiller for her ongoing research as we close. Thank you.
I thank the member. There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next day of sitting. I call the clerk.
Private members' business notice number 6 relating to Western Australia, standing in the name of Ms Mascarenhas.
And I call the member for Hasluck.
I ask leave of the Federation Chamber to move notice number 6 private members' business on behalf of the member for Swan.
Is leave granted?
Leave's granted, Speaker.
Thank you. And member for Hasluck.
I move the motion relating to Western Australia in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper.
Proceed. Proceed, member for Hasluck.
You have to second it. No, you have to.
To reserve my right to speak.
Continue.
Deputy Speaker, from Australia's Western Third, we look out to the Indian Ocean or the Southern Ocean or the Timor Sea. The rest of Australia is a long way for most of us. We have a different perspective, quite literally. We're proud of the contributions we've already made to Australia, and we look forward to the contributions we will make. And to this end, I'm really pleased to be speaking on behalf of the member for Swan's motion.
North Queensland has communion with you.
And indeed, and I particularly want to just draw out that the member for Swan has endeavoured to cover a lot of different areas, because as Western Australians, we aren't just there as the cash cow and the engine room of the nation's economy. We are a people who are very proud of obviously where we come from, but we understand also the particular needs of being able to provide the community levels of infrastructure and support to ensure it is a place where people want to live and work and recreate. Given we're a state that's the size from Victoria all the way to northern Queensland, it goes without saying that the differences are quite vast. And to this end, the member for Swan has, applauded the efforts of not just the federal government, but also the partnership with the state Labor Cook government around infrastructure for major projects such as the Causeway Cyclist pedestrian bridges, the Westport project development, the Metronet, the most significant rail infrastructure build that Western Australia has had ever, the Tonkin Highway corridor. There's so many other major works that have to happen in order to be able to move the enormous amounts of resources that are produced from our great state. But it's not just the infrastructure projects. We need to have that surety of funding, and to this end, we have a federal government with Western Australia's having its back, because being an economic powerhouse of the nation, it needs to be supported. Prime Minister Albanese is on the record as the leader fully committed to supporting Western Australia and supporting Western Australia's GST deal. The opposition leader has nothing to say on this matter. Leading Liberals like Malcolm Turnbull, Scott Morrison, Julie Bishop all cast doubt on his level of support for our GST deal. And if we want to be able to ensure that Western Australia continues to drive the Australian economy, we need to ensure that well-paid jobs, the security comes, ensure it with the right to our fair share of the GST. So a good part of the motion that the member for Swan has introduced points to the critical infrastructure sector. Now, we are a vast state with enormous resources that benefit the entire nation, and the figures differ. The CME suggests that it contributes some $99 billion to the national economy, with some 66,000 directly employed Australians. But the state forecasts are actually even more so, with the mining sector contributing about $186 billion to the state gross product. So that as a share of the federal budget is at least 6%. Needless to say, the numbers are vast, and it demonstrates the importance of supporting this sector. So the Albanese government's Future Made in Australia's plans for music to Sangropers' ears. We're working, planning and building for an Australia that not just provides for homes, secure jobs, secure skilled workers and clean, cheap energy. It also unlocks the private sector investment required to be able to succeed in the new global economy. We're working to strengthen the global supply chains for our critical minerals and building the resilience of the industry. And of course, we've got a wealth of those critical minerals right under our feet, and they are needed for the solar panels, batteries and wind turbines. Without them, we simply are not able to transition to net zero. And we do really excel at extracting critical minerals, but now the challenge is to move into that processing stream. And to this end, we're assisting young people to develop the necessary skills with more than 500,000 fee-free TAFE places. And here I'd like to pay tribute to the outstanding work being done by my colleagues, Madeleine King, the Minister for Resources of Australia, and Andrew Giles, the Minister for Skills and Training. We know that there are geopolitical challenges impacting the critical mineral sector, and we're working on them. But we're also delivering incentives backed by industry, such as our production tax incentive. This $17 billion production tax incentive for critical minerals processing will grow the resource sector in a way that benefits all of our resource-rich states, and by extension, all of us. It will boost, in Western Australia alone, $10 billion worth of critical mineral projects. Western Australia is where it's at, and I'm glad the Albanese Labor government gets Western Australia.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Jura.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's incredible just how out of touch this government is. It's quite clear that since Labor was elected, life for the vast majority of West Australian families has got harder, not easier. That's despite those opposites saying life would be easier, would be cheaper under them. Yet here we are again with those opposite giving themselves an almighty big pat on the back for overseeing this cost of living disaster. The member for Swan in her motion calls on this chamber to recognise that this government understands the specific needs of the West Australian community. Well, I'm sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker, but that is an absurd request, given it is the Albanese Labor government making decisions over here in Canberra to the detriment of our state that aim to shore up inner city votes in the eastern states. Look no further than Labor's dreadful decision to wipe out the West Australian live sheep ban trade. This is an industry that is unique to Western Australia, which supports some 3,000 workers across regional communities that depend on this trade. How can those opposite come into this place saying they understand WA's needs and have our best interest in mind when they have turned their back on our regional communities? Now, the Prime Minister, well, he talks a big game about how often he visits Western Australia, and just a couple of weeks ago he made time to hop on a plane. I'm not sure about the upgrade status, Madam Deputy Speaker, but he hopped on a plane to Geraldton for a photo op with members of the really important crayfish industry, and then back on a plane to Perth. Now, credit where credit is due. I'm very pleased that the crayfish trade with China will resume, and I'd like to note all the constructive efforts of both sides of this House on that matter. Now, while saying that, I'll note that it was reported that the Prime Minister was in Geraldton just for 1 hour. 1 hour. Deputy Speaker, obviously he believes there's nothing else worthy of his attention in the Midwest to have been in Geraldton for just 1 hour. Is he coming back? Because we've got lots of things we need to talk to the Prime Minister about. It's a real shame that he didn't make time to meet with our local sheep farmers who, have been targeted by this government. And we shouldn't be surprised, though, as he has not met once with the West Australian farmers about this ban on their livelihood. Now, let's look at the so-called achievements that the member of Swam has included in her motion. She points to investments in critical infrastructure, and I notice that there is just one example of regional infrastructure, which is the funding for the Outback Way, also known as Australia's longest shortcut. Now, I wonder if the member for Swan is aware that the significant funding for this project was committed to by the coalition government. Need we seriously thank Labor for not tearing up this investment like they did for a multitude of other WA projects, including the $48 million for upgrades to the Marble Bar Road in my electorate? The very next line of the member's motion refers to Labor's support for the GST deal, which we delivered whilst we were in government.
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division, and the proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chambers resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. Question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Durack in continuation.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Again, patting themselves on the back for adopting our policy. It seems the policies that those opposite are most proud of are the Liberal parties, Deputy Speaker. Of course, the GST contribution provides a great source of revenue for the WA government, but we cannot forget the contribution of our mining and resources sector. This is a sector that has been treated like dirt under the Albanese government. Labor's pursuit to add more and more red and green tape is creating further hardship and hurdles to the sector, which has contributed to almost 60% of the nation's iron ore, coal and gas projects having been delayed, disrupted or put on hold. Australia has a pipeline of 421 resource and energy projects with an investment value of more than $525 billion. Almost 40% of these projects are in Western Australia. So that's WA jobs that this government is putting at risk. We're a mining state in a mining nation. It's simple. We won't be able to fund the essential services like Medicare, like NDIS, or build the hospitals in Sydney, or indeed the roads in Melbourne without a strong mining sector. This is a point those opposite fail to understand as they make it harder and harder to get projects off the ground. But West Australians, we're not mugs, and we understand that Labor will attempt to pay us lip service. But when push comes to shove, they will sell our state out if it means they have a better chance to hold off the Greens over East. At the next election, there will be a stark contrast between the Labor government, who has betrayed West Australian farmers and industry, and a coalition who unashamedly backs Western Australia.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Pearce.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Swan for the motion. I rise today to recognise the unwavering commitment of the Albanese Labor government to the unique needs of Western Australia. This commitment is not just a statement. It is a series of actions that reflect our dedication to fostering growth, innovation and prosperity to our great state. We are a diverse and vibrant region, rich in resources and potential. Our government's focus on addressing these unique needs is commendable, ensuring that every corner of our state has the opportunity to thrive. One of the most significant areas where we see this commitment in action is the critical minerals industry. This sector is not just a cornerstone of our economy, it is a gateway to a sustainable future. The world is rapidly transitioning towards renewable energy sources, and Western Australia is poised to be at the forefront of this revolution. Lithium is essential for battery production, and with the increasing demand for electric vehicles and renewable energy storage solutions, demand for the material is set to soar over the coming decades. The critical minerals industry is facing challenges, however, including market manipulation and monopolisation. The Albanese Labor government understands these issues, as well as the importance of supporting our emerging critical minerals processing industry in Australia. Also, International Graphite's battery anode material project represents another significant step forward. Graphite is vital for battery technology, and investing in local processing ensures we capture more value from our resources while contributing to environmental sustainability. I'm also pleased about the recent announcement of a $17 billion production tax incentive for critical minerals processing. This bold move not only encourages investment, but also positions Western Australia as a leader in critical minerals, attracting businesses and talent from around the globe. It is an exciting time for our state of Western Australia as we harness our natural resources responsibly and sustainably. In addition to our investments in critical minerals, we must also acknowledge the Albanese Labor government's commitment to critical infrastructure projects that enhance our communities and improve connectivity across Western Australia. Infrastructure development is essential for economic growth and social well-being. The following are some major projects that are set to transform our Western Australian landscape, the first one being the Westport project development. It aims to modernise our port facilities, facilitating trade and boosting our economy by accommodating larger vessels and increasing efficiency. MetroNet, an ambitious public transport initiative, will connect communities across Perth and beyond, reducing congestion and making travel more convenient for all residents. The Tonkin Highway Corridor expansion will improve road safety and travel times, linking key areas of growth within our state. The causeway, cyclist and pedestrian bridges will promote active transport options, ensuring safe passage for cyclists and pedestrians while enhancing accessibility. The Outback Way, often referred to as Australia's longest shortcut, will enhance connectivity between remote communities, opening up opportunities for tourism, trade and local businesses. These projects are not merely about construction, they represent a vision of progress, one where every citizen can access essential services and opportunities. I'd also like to emphasise the ongoing commitment of the Albanese Labour Government to the Goods and Services Tax Deal for Western Australia. This agreement ensures that we receive our fair share of funding from the federal government. It allows us to invest in vital services such as healthcare, education and infrastructure that are fundamental to the well-being of our communities. The continued advocacy for this deal reflects our understanding that equitable funding is essential for addressing disparities across the regions. It empowers us to make strategic investments that uplift all Western Australians. We face many challenges: climate change, economic shifts and social inequalities. It is imperative that we respond responsibly and effectively. I call upon the opposition to unite with us in supporting these vital initiatives by listening to community voices and prioritising their needs. We can ensure that no one is left behind and secure a sustainable future for all Western Australians. Together we can create an environment where innovation flourishes, infrastructure thrives and communities are empowered. Thank you. And I do apologise for being out of breath, but racing up the stairs with a broken ankle was rather tiring. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Forrest.
Deputy Speaker, there is one question Western Australians need to answer. Are you actually better or worse off since Labor came to government in 2022? Well, in WA we know that Labor has delivered higher costs of living, higher mortgages, 12 interest rate rises, higher costs of doing business, shortages of housing and rental properties, shortages of skilled workers in spite of record immigration, and Western Australians are paying higher prices, higher taxes and higher mortgage repayments because of Labor's homegrown inflation. And Labor is trying desperately to manipulate headline inflation through taxpayer-funded subsidies, subsidies that will be paid for by current and future generations of WA taxpayers. But over and above this, let's just consider how Labor is deliberately and actively damaging Western Australia by closing the live sheep trade. As a farmer myself, I well understand why WA farmers know that the Labor government believes that we are expendable. We simply don't matter. Axing the live sheep trade is a prime example. We Western Australians know that Labor is totally East Coast city elite activist focused, dictating to and actively sacrificing WA farmers and our communities. Every family and farming business matters in regional communities, something that Labor either doesn't understand or couldn't care less about. Each one of these businesses keeps their community going by buying locally from other small businesses and contractors. Livestock transporters, shearers, truckies, stock agents, shearers, schools, vets, mechanics and other small businesses are the lifeblood of rural and regional Australia. The ones that support our local volunteer emergency services, sporting and community groups. Every local dollar that circulates in these communities helps to keep the whole community sustainable. And how about the dreadful financial and personal stress this is forcing onto our farmers and their families? Well, Labor couldn't give a damn in WA. When I watched the then Labor Ag Minister smiling as he held up Labor's document to end live exports, I just thought how disgusting for WA farmers. An Eastern States federal Labor Minister celebrating an end to a farming industry in WA. Labor is coming after WA farmers one sector at a time. And it's not just WA farmers, it's also our beautiful, productive regional communities. Labor is planning to build hundreds of around 300-metre offshore wind turbines in our iconic Geograph Bay off my electorate. Labor will ride roughshod over our southwest by literally forcing our communities to bear the massive burden of Labor's intermittent, unreliable, renewables-only obsession. Like the live sheep closure, Labor is targeting Western Australians once again. Its ruinously expensive green offshore wind dream is our regional community's worst nightmare. Just picture 4,000 square kilometres of hundreds of these 300-metre turbines in our pristine Geograph Bay. What a dreadful and appalling blight on our marine environment in an area that is our major tourism and recreation attraction in the southwest of WA. People come to enjoy the beauty, the sheer beauty and the amazing marine recreational area. They don't come to see visual pollution or bird-killing 300-metre wind turbines or the prospect of significant damage to our marine life. With each one of these actually needing exclusion zones, no-go zones, you imagine the amount of ocean that won't be able to be enjoyed by our local people and tourists alike. Hundreds of turbines, these exclusion zones will excise and lock out all other activities all around the areas of the bay, with hundreds of kilometres of undersea cables, substations and onshore transmission lines. But of course, the Western Australians will be guaranteed to pay more for their power because of the enormous cost of offshore wind. According to a CSIRO report last year, it's at least 3 times more expensive than onshore wind. And the massive turbines will only last around 25 years before they have to be removed and replaced. Or the southwestern WA will be left with rotting wind towers in our pristine Geograph Bay. Well, the community says no and the coalition has said no. Our southwest and WA can be confident that there will be no wind factory in Geograph Bay under a coalition government. Unlike a Labor government that continues to punish WA and our critical mining and resources sector with changes around industrial relations, the Nature Positive Act, the layer upon layer of red and green tape and uncertainty over approvals, continuously biting the hand that feeds them, that is Western Australia. We, on the coalition side, will stand up for Western Australia every day of the week.
The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made an order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clock.
Private Members' Business Notice number 7 relating to the Yazidi people of Sinjar, standing in the name of Mr Hamilton.
I call the member for Groom.
The motion relating to the Yazidi people of Sinjar and the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Thank you very much, Speaker. Newtown Park has a fascinating history. You walk through it today and it's a beautiful rose garden, the Queensland State Rose Garden. But on those grounds, the 11th Light Horse train, they famously followed the 4th and the 12th in the ride on Beersheba, a proud part of our legacy, still there and visible, the training grounds in Newtown Park. And throughout World War II, it was again a camp for US servicemen, for Australians as they prepared for the awful days ahead. Today, Speaker, it serves a very different part of our history. Today you can walk through Newtown Park and see groups of Yazidi Australians, young kids playing soccer, volleyball, groups of elderly women sitting together in a circle talking, and the Yazidi men always walking and talking all the way around the park. I'm there playing basketball with my kids, the challenges of languages and of cultures clashing together played out on this historic park in the centre of regional Australia. It's something I'm intensely proud of, that Toowoomba has become a place of refuge for these people. And it's a legacy that I think the Liberal Party can reflect on with some pride, thinking back to those terribly dark days when the Yazidi people were being horrifically treated in their homeland by ISIS. I won't. When speaking of the 10th anniversary of that terrible historical event, I don't want to go into the depths of what they faced. It's sufficient for us all to know that their homeland became their hell. And I'm very proud that Australia was in a situation to be able to reach out to people in desperate need, Speaker, and extend the hand of friendship and love and give for them a new home here in Australia. And in Toowoomba, we became a place of refuge, and what's been extraordinary, Speaker, is since those first days we have had secondary settlement come to Toowoomba in waves. We now have somewhere around 7,000 Yazidi people living in Toowoomba, the largest regional capital. It's great to see that they've chosen this as their home and they've found safety and security, friendship in our great city. I think this is an important legacy for us to reflect on this side of Parliament. It was under Tony Abbott that decision was made. As our leader, it was under Peter Dutton as our immigration minister to ensure that those people came here. And I think what's important for us in acknowledging the extreme trauma that the Yazidi people went through is that having taken these new friends in to our heart and made them part of our nation, that we continue to help their settlement, because we're talking about a cohort of new Australians who experienced trauma far beyond what the human mind can imagine. And so, Speaker, in remembering those days, I think it's important that we set ourselves forward for what the next 10 years will look like, to make sure that we reach out to the Yazidi Australians and say, hey, look, we understand this is going to be tough, this has been tough, and we'll continue to find ways to work with you. I have been very happy in my community. My predecessor, John McVeigh, sought specific funding to help with that resettlement process, understanding that many of these people did not have a written language, did not have an understanding of how to integrate into our society, and the mechanisms that we might use for other cultures were not working, and we had to find new ways to make that work. Having brought them here, it's our responsibility to make sure that they do settle, and they are given every opportunity. I've continued that fight and to continue that funding. I think, Speaker, I think it's important to point out that when we extended that hand of friendship, it was with very strong borders. It was with a view that the full processes would be applied. And I think that when I speak to particularly the younger Yazidis who remember going through that process and how tough it was, sometimes going to a third country, waiting over a year for their visas to come through, how tough that process was, but how grateful they are to be with us. And I think it's important on this anniversary to say, after all you've been through, we are grateful you've joined us. You've made us a better country. Your hard work and effort is something that we reflect on with great pride. I look forward 10 years' time to saying how well you've settled.
Is there a seconder for the motion? The member for Genomic.
Right to speak.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Fraser.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Can I just preface my comments by saying that I'm speaking here in the place of the member for Wills, who can't be here today for family reasons, but he very much wanted to put on the record his support of the Yazidi people, both here and also in the Middle East. And I think I just wanted to put on the record that he is a champion of human rights issues in that part of the world, but more broadly. And I'm sure that the comments that I make today are broadly in alignment with what he would have said. Can I also acknowledge the mover of the motion, the member for Groom, and just say that it's important that as local members we bring to this chamber the issues that are important to groups in our community who have gone through very difficult times. I know that in my community there are not a lot of people of Yazidi background, but there's people from the Chin community and the Tigrayan community who have been through very similar experiences. And so I want to acknowledge the sentiment and very much support the fact that the Yazidi community in Australia, but in particular I know Toowoomba is the largest such community, does deserve acknowledgement of all they've been through and support. My understanding is that there are around 700,000 Yazidis around the world. Of course, most are living in northern Iraq, in and around Sinjar. I just wanted to make the point that that is a region of the world where at the moment there is a great degree of polarisation, a great degree of conflict, and in many ways a great degree of intolerance. It hasn't always been like that. The Yazidi people have an ancient religion, but one which differs from some other religions being celebrated in that part of the world, and that has led to tension of late. It is very unfortunate, it goes without saying, that we are going through a period, not just in that part of the world, but also in that part of the world, where intolerance is leading to the kinds of incidents that we're, horrific incidents that we're remembering occurred 10 years ago. The slaughter of innocent people that occurred in August 2014, where the Daesh attacked the Yazidi people, is something that we must do everything we can to prevent. And of course, we need to provide as much support as we can to the people adversely affected by such acts. And indeed, the Australian government has continued to support the rights of the Yazidi people to live in safety and security throughout Iraq and Syria. But also, of course, in particular, it's continued to support people seeking refuge in Australia, people with family connections, people who are seeking to avoid extremely dangerous situations in northern Iraq or Syria. We, of course, as the previous speaker mentioned, we acknowledge the horrific experiences that people went through a decade ago. And they would still remain with many people here in Australia who now live in a much more peaceful and secure environment. But of course, some of those acts continue to haunt people forever. And so it's critical that we continue to support people who have been through such horrific situations. Australia continues to advocate for the rights of Yazidis in Iraq, and we do this at the highest level. So, for example, in August 2024, Australia's ambassador to Iraq attended a commemoration in Baghdad and issued a statement to mark the 10th anniversary of the Sinjar massacre. And we continue to monitor the Iraqi government's efforts to achieve justice for the Yazidi government. We also continue to advocate at the highest levels the importance of preventing violence and hate speech against minorities. We also continue to support the Yazidi community through our offshore humanitarian program. Between July 2014 and September 2024, over 7,200 offshore humanitarian visas to Yazidis located in Iraq and Turkey have been granted, focused particularly on Yazidi women as well as their immediate families who endured appalling conditions, often in the captivity of the Daesh. So I want to reiterate the acknowledgement of all that people have gone through and this government and this parliament's continued support for those people.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Bean.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. While I do not agree with all the elements of the motion moved by the member for Groom, I do wish to commend the contributions made by members to this debate, and I commend the member for Groom for representing the concerns of an important community within his electorate. August 3, 2014 was a day of unimaginable horror for the Yazidi people living in Sinjar, northwestern Iraq. Over the following days and months, up to 400,000 people were displaced, countless people were trafficked, kidnapped or killed. Those who survived were forcibly transferred to bordering countries as slaves or trained to fight against their will. The United Nations documented that over 5,000 Yazidis were killed and over 11,000 women and girls were trafficked throughout Iraq and Syria. 10 years on, thousands are still missing. Earlier this year, the UN's investigative team to promote accountability for crimes committed by Daesh released a report concluding war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide were committed by the militant group during their 2014 offensive. Since the outbreak of war in 2014, successive Australian governments have provided humanitarian support for the Yazidi diaspora who now call our country home. We recognise the importance and need for justice for the Yazidi people. Deputy Speaker, persecution has been a painful yet consistent theme for the Yazidi. Spanning across centuries, their resilience has survived countless attempts to wipe them and their faith from history. But Deputy Speaker, two of Australia's greatest attributes are its multiculturalism as well as helping those in need. Australia heeded the call to help, and since 2014, the government has granted thousands of offshore humanitarian visas to Yazidis from Iraq, Syria and Turkey. The government's offshore humanitarian program has focused particularly on women and children, as well as their immediate families. The government is committed to the families of those who have resettled in Australia. So fast forward a decade from that terrible day in Sinjar, Deputy Speaker, and much has changed for those who settled here. Regional hubs like Toowoomba in the division of Groom is now home to one of the largest Yazidi communities in the country. While we may not agree on everything in the motion being put before the House, I admire the member for Groom for strongly advocating for his constituents in this place. Kurdish Kurmanji, their traditional dialect, is the second most spoken language in the region. Those who settled here have not only embraced this new opportunity, but they're giving back to the communities that assisted them when they first arrived. And for those who did resettle here, there's an understanding of feeling happy and safe, yet equally understandably there's a concern for their family and friends who remain at risk of ongoing persecution. Many members of the Yazidi diaspora living in Australia have shared their often horrifying experiences, and that while opening our doors to them was life-changing, concerns linger for the safety of their family members either missing or unable to join them here in Australia. Stories like these reinforce why the government is providing 20,000 visas through our Humanitarian visa program for the 2024-2025 period, ensuring we can permanently resettle and protect in Australia those most in need from around the world. Deputy Speaker, the Australian Government fully supports the rights of Yazidis to live in safety and security throughout Iraq and Syria. We acknowledge the horrific experiences of sexual slavery, torture, mass murder and brutality experienced by the Yazidi communities in Iraq and Syria at the hands of Daesh. We stand united with the Yazidi community and will continue to advocate for their rights and for justice, and monitor the efforts of the Iraqi government to achieve justice for the Yazidi community following that unthinkable violence in 2014. The Australian government also continues to advocate to Iraq the importance of preventing violence and hate speech against minorities and implementing Iraq's laws governing the protection of all minorities, with our ambassador to Iraq recently attending a commemoration in Baghdad and issuing a statement to mark the 10th anniversary of the Sinjar massacre. In that statement, the ambassador noted that the 3rd of August was the 10th anniversary of the Sinjar massacre in Iraq, which marked the beginning of a series of atrocities suffered by the Yazidi people at the hands of Daesh. The Yazidi community faced unthinkable violence, forced displacement and sexual violence. We mourn those lost and honour those who carry forward their memories and culture. We admire the resilience and strength of the Yazidi community, including those that now call Australia home.
There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made an order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 8, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. Motion by the member for Werriwa.
I call the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper.
The member for Werriwa's gone.
I'm a mum of 5, 3 boys aged 36 and 30 and a boy and a girl who died 38 and 32 years ago. When asked about my children, I don't always add Michael and Megan, not because they're no longer part of our family and certainly not because I don't think of them regularly, but because I don't always have the ability to talk to people who haven't suffered the loss of a pregnancy through miscarriage, stillbirth or neonatal loss. Reactions are wide and varied. In the early days, I felt like people shied away from me. I'm sure that was because they didn't know what to say, and for good reason, they just didn't know how to help. But acknowledging the loss and the child by name makes such a difference to a grieving family. Ours is a club no one wants to join, but this year more than 110,000 Australian mums will experience a miscarriage. October each year is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and Sunday the 15th of October was Remembrance Day, when families throughout this country light candles to acknowledge the babies who are thought of often but no longer take a place at the family table. Although Australia is one of the safest places in the world to give birth, around 6 babies are still born and 2 die within the 28 days of birth in the neonatal stage, equating to around 3,000 perinatal deaths a year. And sometimes that's what makes the loss the hardest, because there's so few of you and you rarely know someone in the same situation.
But if you are an Indigenous mum or come from a cold community, you're up to 50% more likely to suffer pregnancy or baby loss. This figure is stubborn and hasn't changed in the 8 years I've been in this place. Indeed, the figure has not substantially changed for 30 years. More research is needed, but access to good, reliable prenatal care is also essential wherever you live. The Albanese government, through the 2024-25 budget, has dedicated $9.5 million to improve care and support provided to women and families experiencing miscarriage and early pregnancy loss. This included $1 million over 2 years to the Australian Institute of Welfare to undertake a miscarriage data scoping study. The study will support work to better understand miscarriage and help to improve the support offered to women and their families, because if you don't know what's happening, you can't help. $1.5 million over 2 years for a national audit of early pregnancy assessment service clinics. Improved information can be used by GPs and other health professionals to ensure women experiencing pregnancy loss and other early pregnancy complications are referred to the proper specialist services where feasible. $1.5 million to develop miscarriage education and awareness resources, including public awareness and education programs, and $5.5 million over 4 years for frontline miscarriage support services to provide evidence-based, culturally safe bereavement care and support for women and families who've been impacted by miscarriage. And funding of $0.9 million over 2 years was also announced to continue to monitor and evaluate activities under the National Stillbirth Action and Implementation Plan. This is building on funding from previous budgets for the continuation of Red Nose Australia's Hospital to Home program, which provided services for over 2,000 Australian families who experience stillbirth each year. Funding to deliver high-quality, evidence-based bereavement care for women and families from high-risk population groups that have experienced stillbirth and miscarriage, especially those from First Nations, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and those families living in rural and remote areas, and for women younger than 20. This also includes direct bereavement counselling and training for health professionals. There are encouraging signs that the research will help families and babies reduce the rate of deaths and miscarriages every year, but more importantly, families will feel and be more supported in their journey of loss. To every family whose babies are no longer with them, I share your pain and remember your loved ones and acknowledge them.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Seconded. I second it.
The member for Patterson. Thank you. I call the member for Hughes. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this motion brought by the Honourable Member for Werriwa, and I thank her for bringing this important matter to the attention of the House and also for sharing her personal stories. Deputy Speaker, 15th of October every year marks Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. It acknowledges the shared loss experienced by parents, friends and healthcare workers of those little ones lost too soon, whether through miscarriage, stillbirth, neonatal death or by any other loss. The day serves as a moving reminder of the universal sadness felt by parents, friends and healthcare professionals in the wake of the devastating loss of infants due to miscarriage, stillbirth, neonatal death or any other tragic event. The joy and excitement that a much hoped-for pregnancy brings sadly ends in tragedy and grief for far too many Australians. Deputy Speaker, every year 110,000 Australians experience a miscarriage, more than 2,000 experience stillbirth and almost 700 lost a baby within the first 28 days. The recognition of these numbers underscores the gravity of the issue. I have sadly witnessed friends endure the pain and loss, the absolute cruelty that a miscarriage can bring. These are mostly endured in silence. Most miscarriages occur within the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. A
period where most expectant mothers are reluctant to share their news. They and their partner often then grieve together but alone, with the loss unacknowledged. Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day serves as a sombre yet necessary moment for reflection and unity, transcending political boundaries and embodying a bipartisan sentiment. It acknowledges the pain that countless families endure across the nation, emphasising the importance of compassion, empathy and support in times of devastating loss. And Deputy Speaker, it's also an important day for the support services available for bereaved families, encouraging open discussion about these difficult topics and creating a sense of connection among individuals who have faced unimaginable grief. My journey with my very premature babies brought me into contact with mothers and fathers suffering the loss of a child at the NICUs at various hospitals, including here at the Canberra Hospital. My husband Michael and I were very fortunate 18 years ago with our little miracles. However, I'll never forget how close we came to a very different outcome. I vowed then that at any opportunity I would raise the issue of premature births, miscarriages and also infant loss. Deputy Speaker, families undergoing these traumatic events need significant support. This year I was privileged to be able to attend a special memorial service at Warrenora Memorial Park at Carinya Children's Garden. The service was highlighted by music, the lighting of candles, release of white doves and some very courageous keynote speakers. I particularly mention parents of Raphael, who lost their little son earlier this year. Parents of precious babies lost decades ago said, "You never get over it, you just learn to live with it." And Deputy Speaker, also present at the service were representatives from Bears of Hope. This organisation has a collection of teddy bears available for families who have suffered pregnancy or infant loss. Because for many of those families, they leave hospital with a suitcase instead of leaving with their brand new baby. So Bears of Hope are there. They have 3 different types of bears, and what they do is they ensure that the family goes home with a package which includes a little bear, so that the family is not leaving the hospital with just their suitcase. So the 3 bears is Bear Hope, which is recommended for families who experience the early loss of their baby, and this is the smallest bear. Sophie is recommended best for families who have the opportunity to see and hold their baby. This may include circumstances of late miscarriage, stillbirth or loss shortly after birth, and Sophie is the middle-sized bear. Lastly, Xavier is most suitable for families who have experienced the loss of their baby in an IC, intensive care or special care nursery or through infancy. He's the largest bear of hope in their family. So, Deputy Speaker, I wanted to especially mention this organisation. The loss of a child has a devastating impact on families, causing significant personal, social and financial consequences for parents. We need to continue to recognise and acknowledge that. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm at the stage of life when a lot of my children's friends are thinking about babies, having babies or trying to have babies. It's a time of great joy to my peers, the grandmothers and grandfathers, but it also means that I'm hearing of young women who are losing babies during pregnancy, and that makes it a time of real sadness and despair for some. While shifting attitudes mean that it's more likely to be spoken about now than when I was young, that doesn't change the pain that the loss brings. No one knows exactly how many miscarriages occur in Australia each year, but it's estimated that 1 in 5 confirmed pregnancies end in a miscarriage, and that's about 110,000 every year in Australia. Miscarriage or early pregnancy loss, which is the loss of a baby before 20 weeks gestation, is the most common complication of pregnancy and can be devastating and traumatic for women, their families and their support people. It's not hard to imagine how it can have lasting impacts on a woman's physical and mental health throughout her life. Devastatingly, 1 to 2% of Australian women will experience 3 or more consecutive miscarriages, and that brings a lot of pain with it. This is an area of healthcare where there's still a shortage of data and information, as well as still too much silence. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a party with more women than men in Parliament is building on what has already been done in the past to continue to try and change that. The last budget dedicated funding of $9.5 million over 4 years to improve the care and support provided to women and families who experience miscarriage and early pregnancy loss. It's things like $1 million over 2 years for the Australian Institute of Welfare to undertake a miscarriage data scoping study. The study will support work to better understand miscarriage and help improve the support offered to women and their families. There's funding for a national audit of the Early Pregnancy Assessment Service clinics with the aim of improving information on the EPAS clinics so GPs and other health professionals can ensure that women experiencing pregnancy loss or other early pregnancy complications are referred to specialised services where that's feasible. It's things like $1.5 million to develop miscarriage education and awareness resources, including a public awareness and education program. It's $5.5 million over 4 years for frontline miscarriage support services to provide evidence-based, culturally safe bereavement care and support to women and families who've been impacted by miscarriage. I hope that through these measures we have a better understanding of pregnancy loss and can better support women and partners experiencing it. Our work of this Parliament also continues supporting women experiencing stillbirth. Stillbirth can also be a horrible thing for women to go through and their families, resulting in ongoing grief, anxiety and depression, as well as the social and financial impacts. Now, Australia is one of the safest places in the world to give birth, but even so, around 6 babies are stillborn and 2 die within 28 days of birth, equating to around 3,000 perinatal deaths per year. That's a lot of families who've lost their child. In 2022, there were 297,725 babies born in Australia. 2,357 of these were stillbirths. While any pregnancy can result in stillbirth, rates remain higher among First Nations women, cold communities, migrant and refugee groups, women living in rural and remote Australia, and women younger than 20 years. Australia has become a world leader in stillbirth awareness and prevention thanks to the work of many previous governments and leads the way in supporting parents and families, but there is still more to do. The evaluation of the Stillbirth Action Plan from a few years ago shows that there have been concrete developments in prevention, healthcare professionals are more consistent in offering investigations, but we know there's more to do, and I know that across the Parliament there's a deep commitment to ensuring we keep improving in this area.
There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made an order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, next order of the day. Resumption of debate on the motion on the banking sector, moved by the member for Groom.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Casey.
Deputy Speaker, well, I want to commend the member for Groom for this very important motion. Banking, as we know, impacts us all. Every Australian is impacted, every business, all of our communities. And we need to particularly make sure that we have competition in the sector and we support smaller banks to hold those bigger banks to account. And the impact of regulation that's not thought out or over-regulation can be crippling in any industry, particularly in banking. And we already know that there are 130 new regulatory changes that banks are having to deal with. And over-regulation, it stifles growth, it stifles innovation, and it stifles productivity. We need to always look to get the balance right about protecting consumers making sure the frameworks are correct, but not over-regulating to cause more harm than good. And we should never forget, Deputy Speaker, that over-regulation entrenches big businesses over small businesses, because big business has the scale to amortise their cost across all consumers, across all of their companies. They also have the resources to invest in more staff to make sure they can be up to date with those regulations. And it actually creates a competitive advantage for those big banks versus the small banks. And it is crucial, as I said at the start, that we support small banks. One example of small banks that could have been impacted negatively through these changes were the Bendigo banks. Now, Bendigo Bank play a huge role in my community. We've got the Mount Evelyn Community Bank, the Belgrave Community Bank, the Community Bank of Upwey, the Monbalkan District Community Bank, Mooroolbark Community Bank, Hillsville Community Bank, the Wurriolican District Community Bank, Wandon Seville Community Bank, the Community Bank of Warburton, and the Community Bank Yarra Junction. All of these banks work in partnership with Bendigo Bank, but it's really important to understand that they're community-led. It's not just in name. They are led by volunteer boards. And I want to thank all the volunteers that give up so much of their time to make sure that the banks are run well, to make sure that the banks are profitable. They turn up at many community events. I'm lucky enough to spend a lot of time at community events with the volunteer boards from the Bendigo banks. But one of the other crucial roles that a Bendigo bank plays is giving back to our community. They give back over the last 20 years tens of millions of dollars to sporting clubs, to community groups, to charities, to those in need. I know when the Mount Evelyn Football Netball Club were lucky enough to get their rooms redeveloped, it was a partnership between the state, the federal, the local council. Significant funds from the Mount Evelyn Community Bank went into making sure the fit-out could be properly done to make sure they had a quality facility, particularly as the growth came through in their women's programs. Without community banks, our community wouldn't be as strong as it is. And that's why we need to get regulation like this right. We have to ensure that they can remain profitable. We have to ensure that they are serving the community. Because the other thing that a community bank will do, that we've seen other bigger banks not do, is make sure that they have a footprint in the community through infrastructure, through a physical bank, which ensures those Australians that aren't tech savvy or are concerned about scams can walk into the bank and have a conversation and make sure that all their data is being protected and they can deal with the transactions as they need to. And at the same time that my office is receiving complaint after complaint about the big four banks leaving our community, I stood with pride at the Mount Evelyn Community Bank as we opened their new shop just 2 weeks ago, Deputy Speaker. It was an investment in funds in our community to make it more open and more engaging, but it was a signal to the Mount Evelyn community that the Bendigo Bank was there to stay. And every Bendigo bank across my community, the Upper Yarra, the Dandenong Ranges, all those banks I mentioned, have physical locations so people can walk in, have a conversation, have the questions answered that they need. And yes, there is a cost in that, but they see that cost not as something to wash away, but as a benefit to the community. That's what they stand there to do. So every time APRA, every time the government look to make regulation and laws, we need to make sure we get that balance right and allow our smaller community banks to continue to flourish and drive competition in the sector.
Thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Fraser.
Deputy Speaker, so I think it's worth, at the start of this contribution, taking a step back and asking, why do we have prudential regulation? Well, essentially we have prudential regulation for two main reasons. One is to ensure that financial institutions are operated in a way that is prudent and safe, and that those institutions have good governance and appropriate capital holdings. But the second reason, and one that is of great importance to our community, the first is of great importance to our community, but the second, which is of even greater importance to our community, is that we ensure that there's prudential regulation of our banks so that there is stability of the overall financial system. So prudential regulation requires that banks hold sufficient capital, that banks have suitable governance, that banks undertake appropriate scenario planning. And that's because we don't want large organisations being run in such a way that they're at risk. But the second aspect, and this is critical to regulation of the financial sector, is that there are systemic risks because banks are interconnected in the way that they operate, because banks, of course, as part of the financial services sector, are interconnected with all other parts of our economy, and because banks are so large. So it's absolutely critical for our community that our financial system has a degree of stability. If there was systemic risk in our financial system, and if things were not regulated in an appropriate way, we would see things like the GFC bear their ugly heads more often. So APRA's role is absolutely critical, and I think that piece of context is really important. What are the kinds of rules that we talk about in this situation? Well, as I alluded to, the rules in the prudential regulatory space are largely around banks holding sufficient capital, appropriate governance and scenario planning, appropriate stress testing and modelling of risks. And so the importance of Australia's well-managed prudential setting is borne out in many instances, but most recently we saw, for example, where there was the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank and the carnage of all the devastated businesses left in its wake, and the spectre of systemic risk in the US and European systems, we were spared from that. And that's just one example of a number of the importance of solid prudential regulation by APRA. Key to this is not just that APRA undertakes sound regulation in relation to capital holdings, in relation to stress testing, but also that it's independent. This independence of APRA has been instrumental in its success over a long period of time. Now, other speakers on this motion have pointed to the fact that we need to be cognisant of the importance of small banks in our system and customer-owned banks, and I agree with that. In the competition inquiry that I chaired, undertaken by the House Economics Committee, we looked at the important role of small banks, of customer-owned banks. We need to have competitive pressure in our system. That is vitally important. But there are balancing acts here that a prudential regulator must undertake. And that's why it's critically important that in addition to bearing in mind the importance of the role that customer-owned banks and small banks play, as alluded to in this motion, it is critically important that the prudential regulator has an eye on that systemic risk and the good management of our large banks. Now, the analysis that was undertaken by APRA in relation to some of the non-Big Four banks was undertaken in a very targeted way. It was undertaken in a way with strong levels of engagement, and it was undertaken in the way that you would expect of an independent, robust, rigorous regulator. The motion alludes to the fact that some of the regulation was unnecessary, but I would simply make the point that it is critical that we have fit-for-purpose regulation which balances a number of interests. Critical amongst those being the systemic stability of our system. I would also just make the point that this government, in addition to supporting the ongoing role of APRA, which is reflected in the analysis that it's undertaken in relation to the non-Big Four banks, has undertaken significant reforms to reduce the amount of red tape and overlap in our regulatory system. For example, with the Regulatory Grid initiative. That was something which came up on many occasions in the competition inquiry that the House Economics Committee undertook. It was something which was supported by the small banks, by the medium banks, the customer-owned banks, was also supported by the Big Four banks, mind you. It was supported by the fintech sector, supported by insurers, right across the financial services sector. And this government has taken action on that. Let's look at what this government has actually done compared to 10 years of inaction before that.
Thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this motion, which is regarding the APRA requirements for smaller banks. And I first start by commending the member for Groom for bringing this motion. The regulation that is proposed can be a bit complex, and so, Deputy Speaker, I'm going to attempt to bring it down to a simpler level. Essentially, the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, APRA, in November last year, announced it was investigating tighter liquidity and capital requirements for smaller, what they call authorised deposit-taking institutions. When they made this announcement, however, APRA did not provide any evidence to justify the change. It seems that APRA had failed to consult with industry and provided no evidence to support the change in policy. So straight away, Deputy Speaker, I think in circumstances where a regulator with the power of APRA is conducting an inquiry and a lack of consultation in that way does start to raise some serious questions. We have a banking sector in Australia that is already subject to considerable prudential regulation, and I think overall it's intelligent in its approach to ensuring the banking sector's resilience to financial market stress. And these were the sort of reasons that have been put forward fairly broadly as for why these changes to liquidity and things are required. And what this is actually about, Deputy Speaker, this is about a power imbalance between our big four banks and our smaller community banks and other mutual societies and organisations. And that it is not good when we are seeing competition eroded between these organisations, and the ones in the end that suffer are, of course, the Australian consumer. So, on our side, Deputy Speaker, we believe very strongly in the powers of the markets, in the powers of entrepreneurial approaches to everything, including the financial sector. And particularly, we believe in competition. And the changes that have been proposed will result in less competition, less access to capital by consumers, and overall higher costs for consumers. And I think we need to first of all look at the very important role that smaller banks, smaller financial organisations play within our community. Because of their very nature, community banks tend to channel most of their loans to the neighbourhoods where their depositors live and work, helping to keep communities vibrant and growing. And we heard the member for Casey talking about the number of those banks and organisations within his electorate that contribute significantly to all of the activities within a local community. And I note in mine, particularly with supporting local sport and other local charities. And I think that the community banks have a real presence in the community. One of the biggest complaints that I receive in my office is about bank closures. But community banks, because they do have a physical presence, they have tellers there, they have real people, this provides invaluable assistance to elderly people, people with a disability who may, for example, be unable to access internet banking because of their vision impaired. They may be people with a disability or people who simply do not have internet access, and there are still plenty of those in Australia. So these are the sort of very direct services that these community banks provide, and that should be encouraged. Community banks also provide very important competition, particularly within the housing sector. And at a time when the Bank of Mum and Dad has become the 6th biggest lender in Australia, we're approaching a situation where whether or not you end up owning a home will depend upon the circumstances of your birth. And that there is a role there for these smaller banks to assist, often in circumstances where the larger banks will refuse first home buyers. So, Deputy Speaker, it is extremely important on our side that we maintain the strength and the integrity of these smaller banks. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I am a member of the House Standing Committee on Economics and regularly hear from the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority. APRA does essential work in helping to ensure that our financial system is the best that it can be. Of course, there will always be room for improvement, And part of our role as parliamentarians and committee members is to find ways, sometimes legislative ways, to help APRA improve. That said, it is part and parcel of the role of APRA, as with all such authorities, that is able to do its work independently. The member for Groom is not a stranger to the work of the House Economics Committee, given that he is a member of it, and so he therefore knows this. The independence of APRA is a part of the trust that underpins its regulation activity, and the government respects that independence. Our well-regulated banking sector enables us to better weather crises. We have seen runs on banks and building societies from time to time, and when there is a global economic crisis, which also occurs, we need to ensure we are not just willing to deal with the threat, but that we are able to do so. The limitation of liquidity risk is central to APRA's role. The member for Groom used the word unnecessary. None of this is unnecessary, quite the opposite. The Silicon Valley Bank collapse in March 2023 sent shockwaves around the USA and around the world. It was the third largest banking collapse in US history. Banking systems in different parts of the world experience challenges and crises from time to time. It would be nice to feel that some countries are immune from, and that a banking crisis somewhere else in the world does not hold lessons for Australia. In fact, the interconnectedness of the global financial system means that contagion is a real and significant danger both within and between national systems. 2008 taught us that quite clearly. APRA are considering changes in the liquidity and capital requirements for smaller banks in Australia, and doing so in the wake of this most recent Silicon Valley Bank collapse. It is not a coincidence. Arguably, any regulator in any country around the world which does not review its settings on a regular basis, and particularly after a spectacular failure, which is what the Silicon Valley Bank was, is simply not doing its job. The concerns about Silicon Valley Bank that motivates this review are real. The Australian Financial Review describes that bank as having been eviscerated over the course of just 2 days. APRA are at the sharp end of our efforts to ensure that our system as a whole is healthy enough to withstand a shock to one part of it, to guarantee that the failure of a bank won't cause a contagion that infects others, including the larger banks. APRA commenced its consultations on this matter a year ago. The proposals involve a narrowing of the gap in requirements between banks of different sizes, and they do not otherwise propose to treat small lenders in the same way as large ones. As I say, a responsible regulator cannot simply shy away from the need to reconsider its settings, nor has APRA done so in a vacuum. Contrary to the statement in this motion, it received 35 submissions from entities, individuals and industry bodies during the formal 3-month consultation period, and reached out to do further work with industry stakeholders. APRA now proposes that banks subject to the minimum liquidity holdings regime for calculating their liquidity requirements will be required to adjust the value of their liquid assets regularly for movement in market prices, and that all banks must be operationally ready to provide certain key information regarding their financial position when requesting exceptional liquidity assistance from the Reserve Bank of Australia. These 2 measures will come into effect from the 1st of July 2025. Further action will be considered, and in the meantime, APRA expects all institutions to take steps to improve the diversification of their portfolios to support liquidity. APRA has here struck a balance between consumer safety, competition and efficiency. The member for Groom doesn't like the balance. The regulator is independent. I am alive, however, to the concern around the need to support competition in the sector and to support our community-owned banks, among others. The introduction of a financial sector regulatory initiatives grid by the Albanese government on the back of the House Economics Committee's report into competition will...
Time has expired. There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next day of sitting. And the member for Holt seeking the call.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion,
I thank the member
Deputy
for
Speaker.
Fowler. The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those that are of that opinion say aye. Those to the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the 5th of November.